Hello, you are listening to Trump Republic Radio. It is August 20th, 2017. I'm your host, Enzo Quesada, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Bobby Hester.
Hello, everyone.
Before we get into the show, I just want to remind everyone that we are taking donations. The donations will be, the PayPal link for that is in the description. It's paypal.me/Trump Republic Radio. If you appreciate the work that we've been doing for over the last 6 months, and you want to help us out, just drop us some money. We also have timestamps in the description, so if you want to skip past something and find the cool story you want, you can do that. Anything else, Bobby, we need to say before we get into it?
Let's just get right into it.
Oh, one more thing. If you feel like contacting us, we're TrumpRepublicRadio@gmail.com. That's also in the description if you have any sort of questions or any comments or anything. But with that said, let's get into the show.
Let's do it.
So the first thing that we wanted to talk about, which when I first received this news, I was very sad, but I am not as sad as I was then, is Steve Bannon has now left the White House.
That's right. Steve Bannon, who is Trump's...
was Trump's.
Well, yes, that's right. He was, Trump's... what was his exact position?
He was Chief Strategist.
Chief Strategist of the White House. And, he's been with Trump. He worked in his campaign.
He was the last campaign manager.
Yeah, and arguably, he was probably one of the smartest people, at least for working at the White House there.
He was such a great strategist. He came in the campaign after Paul Manafort got us through the RNC. One of the best things that Steve Bannon did during the campaign, you remember, I believe it was before the second debate, he ran that press conference thing where he just said to the press, hey, if you want to, come to my press conference, you can. And it was all a setup to the Bill Clinton is a rapist thing where all the women that accused Bill Clinton of being a rapist were just talking. Bannon was the one that organized it.
Bannon was also the one who organized bringing one of Bill Clinton's rape victims to the second debate. So, there's all the pictures of Bill Clinton looking over at her when she's sitting on the Trump side. That was Bannon's idea.
Yeah, it really, I think, did make a difference during that debate. They were so nervous, and Bill Clinton was definitely, freaked out. And I feel like it was getting to Hillary, which, she was fed questions during those debates. So anything to, even the playing field.
The second debate was the one where Trump, hands down, won that thing.
Yeah.
That was the one where he said you'd be in jail.
Yeah, that was the best thing
probably
ever.
One of the most... probably soon to be one of the most famous political debates of all time.
Which, that was 2 days after the pussy grab tape came out, so, it was phenomenal. But, Bannon, he has been the biggest advocate for the things that me and you care about, pushing Donald Trump's nationalistic policies. He's really kept Trump to the fire on it. The public perception of Bannon has been pretty negative. The media's run him through, the ringer with all the stuff. I know Saturday Night Live was attacking him constantly, but if the establishment media is attacking you as much as they were
you
attacking
got to be
Bannon,
doing something right.
He is doing something right because he approaches these things so different. I am kind of saddened that he's left because it does show that we have lost a guy that has kept Trump to the fire in a big sense, but he's gone back to work for Breitbart, which is where he originally came from, and he said he's going to now fight Donald Trump's opponents on Capitol Hill and the corporations and whatnot from his position in the media at Breitbart. And I don't know, Breitbart's okay. I'm not the biggest fan, but if he can organize people to get behind Trump's agenda that way, I'm fine with that.
I think it's also good because now that he's not actually in the White House, it's pretty much all gloves are off, and he can do whatever he wants. And so by leading Breitbart, he can pretty much use that almost as a extremely pro-Trump wing of the media that's been lacking this entire time. It never really existed.
It is just kind of scary now, though, with who has been left in the White House to influence Donald Trump. Now it's just Stephen Miller, Jared Kushner, McMaster. You go back to the Syria strike, which we were immensely against, even though the general public did support the strike into Syria. Bannon was the one that was the biggest advocate against doing so. And I do feel that, like, foreign policy-wise, now Trump can be influenced to be more interventionist.
And speaking of foreign policy, I know we're going to get to this later in the program, but tomorrow, in fact, because we're recording this on Sunday, but tomorrow night, Monday night, Trump is going to be making his first televised speech from the White House, and he's going to go over his plan for Afghanistan. So with Bannon gone, it's very possible that that might mean we're sending more troops there. But like I said, we're going to get to that later.
Yeah. But is there anything else about Steve Bannon leaving that you want to comment on? There was that one thing that he made the statement of, the Trump that we elected, that we to get into power, he's gone now. Did you see that comment?
Who was the one who made that comment?
Bannon himself.
Was it Bannon?
That White House, he said, is over. So I do have, like, conflicting opinions, because, like, he says he's still going to fight for Trump, but he says, like, the Trump that we fought to vote for and, got into the White House is over now.
I guess
it's scary in that sense. I don't want to get depressed on Donald Trump all of a sudden, but maybe things do go to shit after this. I don't know, because Bannon was our best advocate for what we want to do.
I guess it's one of those things we really just have to wait and see, because who knows, things might stay relatively the same.
Yeah.
I mean, the media is going to hate Trump no matter what he's doing, and he's going to try to do his best no matter who's advising him.
But this Bannon situation, he wasn't actually fired. He resigned himself. He put in the resignation notice 2 weeks prior, and Trump and Bannon both said that this has been a very amicable process, so I guess there's no reason to be worried in that sense, but yeah, we're just going to have to wait and see.
Yeah, and if Steve Bannon is still saying that he's going to be fighting for Trump as he's working at Breitbart, he wouldn't be saying that. He wouldn't be so pro-Trump, fighting for Trump, fighting against the globalists, fighting against the establishment, if he thought that the Donald Trump that we elected was no longer there. Unless that's part of the point. He feels that the Trump that's, there too many bad people are fighting for him, so he need to get out there and kind of be an outside force. So it's just one of those things we have to wait and see.
Yeah. But, I don't really have any other comments on it other than, like, I do miss having Bannon in the White House. I always like to joke about, like, I miss when Bannon was the president because he had his biggest impact early on in the administration, those first 2 months or so. Or was it 2 weeks? I don't know. He was the one that orchestrated the travel ban. And
that was in the first 2 weeks.
Yeah, that was the first 2 weeks. That's when it seemed like everything was just winning for us, and it got derailed after that, but I don't know.
Well, Trump is definitely in need of a win, so we'll be looking out for something here in the near future.
Yeah. Let's move on to this next story, though. This happened just in the last couple of days, wasn't it?
This was yesterday,
Yesterday. I think. There were some police ambushes. You got the specifics on that for us, Bobby?
Yeah, I do. So, this happened the other day. Yesterday, which was on Saturday. Where a total of 6 police officers in total were shot across the country. 4 of them were shot in Florida, and 2 of them were shot in Pennsylvania. And it appears that 2 of the ones who were shot in Florida have both died. Their names have been released. And they said the 2 officers that were killed in Florida were in the Kissimmee area, which I'm not exactly sure where the Kissimmee area of Florida is. Do you happen to know exactly where that's at?
No, I don't. I've been to Florida maybe 6 or 7 times in my life, but I've never heard of that area.
I know that we were there last year, but we went to Orlando. And but anyway, actually, Kissimmee is just it's just south of Orlando. Actually, it's in about the same area that we were there.
Oh, really?
So, but yeah, it's unfortunate though. It appears that some of these were shot in ambush styles. It's unknown if they were related or not. All the shootings, but the fact that they all happened relatively around the same period of time, they were all officers getting shot. It doesn't appear that there were shootouts. In fact, they said that the 2 officers that were shot in Florida and Kissimmee, they did not return fire, and it appears that they were surprised by the incoming fire. So that screams ambush to anyone who's actually reading that. But with all the anti-police rhetoric that comes out of the left nowadays, I would not be surprised if these things were connected and are part of some bigger thing for people that hate cops.
Yeah, I don't know. We can't really make assumptions, but it is just crazy that cops are just getting ambushed, out of nowhere. That happened a lot last summer. It was even worse last summer.
Yeah, especially with the Dallas shooting.
Which, 6 officers were killed by that one gunman. It's crazy stuff.
But yeah, it's kind of, even though it happened yesterday and there hasn't been too much more news to come out of it, it's still technically really a developing story. All the other police, I believe, are still in the hospital. I'm not quite sure on what their conditions. I think they said a couple of them were still critical. So we're just going to have to see what happens, and hopefully there won't be any more police shootings, shootings of police, I should specify that, across the country here in the next couple of days.
Yeah, let's get into this next thing, though. So Trump has ended his manufacturing council after a number of CEOs quit because of his statements in regard to the Charlottesville incident.
And obviously it's pretty famous now what he said, where he blamed both sides for the violence that was there, which I personally believe, that's true. There was violence that happened on both sides. To ignore the violence of one side just because you disagree with one side politically, that's very intellectually dishonest to do. Trump is absolutely right. By blaming both sides were to blame. But so many people saw that as his, a failure to condemn the people who went to the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville. And several of the CEOs that were on his council there, they decided to quit over it. And enough of them quit to the point where we said, fine, you know what, if you're going to quit my council, I'm just going to not have a council. So he tweeted out that he was getting rid of the council. And personally, I feel like that's a bad decision, because if you want input from business leaders, you want input from CEOs.
Which he has been good about up to this point, receiving, criticism and comments from people in manufacturing. That's why manufacturing has been so on point up to this point. But, there's been polling about his Charlottesville comments, and even though the media and the establishment politically have been eviscerating him for these comments, generally, a majority of Americans do support the comments he said. And, we look at the stuff that was happening just yesterday with the Boston free speech rally and the stuff that was happening in Dallas. People do realize that the Antifa, or as Donald Trump put it, the alt-left, are a very violent force that are, getting in the way of people's freedom of speech. So I do feel that people are coming towards Donald Trump's reasoning in that statement that he made.
Oh, very much so. Immediately after the events of Charlottesville that happened last week, it seemed like, every single person was condemning the people that went there, to the point where they're, labeling everybody that's moderately even right-wing to be like, white supremacists.
It's gotten crazy how they've labeling almost everyone on the right now a Nazi.
Even like you said, the people that went to the Boston free speech rally yesterday. There was an Indian American who was running for office, was one of the main speakers they had there. They only had like 10 to 15 people that actually showed up, with about 10 to 15,000 protesters outside. And so, that's all the violence happened from the left. The Boston police even tweeted out saying, can we please have people not throw urine and rocks at our police officers? That wouldn't happen if there was violence coming from both sides. Anyone who's been following anything remotely close to political violence in this country for the last 2 years knows that it's all coming from, leftists and antifas. Look back at the
you can't say all, but a lot of it is.
A vast majority.
They're definitely gaining power at the moment.
Yeah, if you look back at events like the Battle of Berkeley that happened earlier this year, stuff that, earlier events that happened in Berkeley, San Jose last year during the summer.
When they're attacking them after that Trump rally.
Yeah, the D.C., Inauguration Day violence, all of this stuff has happened due to leftist violent groups like that. And yeah, there has been violence that has come from the right, but it's nowhere even close to what's coming from the left. But the point I was trying to make here, though, is that while it seemed like every person in the world was jumping on the bandwagon of just labeling everybody in the right to be, some Nazi, the last 3 or 4 days, especially after more information about the Charlottesville event came out, I've seen more and more people talking about how they don't like Antifa. And that's people that have never even mentioned it before at all. And if you look back, there was a meme that was going around that CNN did not have a single article at all that had the word Antifa in it until this week.
And they were promoting Antifa.
Exactly,
they said that they were trying to achieve peace through violence. Like, they were running cover for Antifa.
Yeah, I know. It's absolutely terrible.
And, like, okay, yeah, there were Nazis at Charlottesville, and they deserve their condemnation as well. But, you know, I've been seeing so many people saying, like, oh, because you condemn the leftists, you side with the fascists as well. And that's a false dichotomy, okay?
Yeah.
That's ridiculous. I can be against people that are committing political violence, okay? That doesn't make America great again. It gets in the way of doing that on either sides.
And if you're trying to silence someone's free speech just because you disagree with them, I mean, that is the antithesis of what this country was built on. Well, you think the founding fathers, if someone had something that someone disagreed with, they would go out there and start beating them with sticks? I highly doubt it.
No. But it's getting crazy, though. People that, just are getting randomly attacked now, being accused of being Nazis. They aren't at all. I mean, there's been multiple instances where they're getting stabbed. It's a big side tangent from this manufacturing council stuff, but I guess this is an extremely relevant thing to talk about.
Yeah,
it's insane where the stuff's going,
and
it's not going to stop.
We have more
soon.
to talk about Antifa later in the show, so let's just put.
Let's
that
move
off
on to the
that
next
point.
thing, though. So, do you got the information on this next thing, Bobby?
Yes, I do. So the next thing that's up on our list is that a woman by the name of Hope Hicks, she is now serving as the interim White House communications director. She was hired earlier this week to fill the position after Scaramucci was fired. I think that was, last week or 2 weeks ago? It's been
2 weeks ago.
Yeah, it's been a little bit while. But, she's kind of I don't really want to say that she is a newcomer. But she currently but she's only 28 years old, so it's not so it's not like she's some older person. No, she is young. She is in touch with what's going on in the world. She's in touch with what's going on in this country. She knows how to reach out to people. She knows how to reach out to millennials. She knows how to reach out to older people. She knows how to reach out to Trump's base. She actually started as Trump's press secretary during his campaign in 2015, and she's worked right outside the Oval Office this entire time. So she's been right there, kind of behind the scenes without people really knowing who she is. So by her serving as the interim White House communications director until a permanent replacement is found, a lot of people doubt that she will actually be the one who ends up as the job or with the job as communications director. But the fact that she is serving as interim, at least now, I feel like that's a pretty decent job for her.
Yeah. I personally don't know about her, but you seem to, so I got to take your word on that.
From what I've heard about her, she's pretty good. Obviously, she's only been on the job for a couple days now, so we'll see where that goes. But, other than that, I think we're good.
Yeah. Let's go into the next thing, though, that I know me and you have actually been anticipating, though, for a while now.
Yeah.
And that's the result of the primaries in Alabama.
Right. So the primaries in Alabama was held on August 16th, so that was 4 days ago from where we were. Both the Republican and the Democrat primaries were going. Now, Alabama being such a Republican state, it doesn't really matter who won on the Democratic side, but a guy by the name of Doug Jones, he won on the Democratic side with 109,000 votes. Now, for the Republican primary, they had it so that if no individual candidate reached, if no individual candidate was to reach 50%, then the top two candidates would then advance to a runoff election, which is going to be held near the end of September. So the two people that ended up advancing to that are Roy Moore and Luther Strange. Now, Luther Strange is currently the senator there, who's serving as kind of the interim senator to replace Jeff Sessions.
Yeah.
Since Jeff Sessions,
which he's more like Mitch McConnell aligned, which is not who we want in there.
Yeah, and Trump actually had endorsed Luther Strange,
which sucked.
I did not like that. However, Roy Moore is much, much more in tune with the wanting to make America
the
great
Trumpian
again, with being on the Trump
individual.
Train, and
which we talked about this in our primary and midterm preview pretty extensively, the situation in Alabama, but we both want Roy Moore to be the guy.
Oh, absolutely. And we want Roy Moore to be the guy. We don't want Luther Strange to be the guy. Roy Moore got 9% of the vote, and Luther Strange got 33% of the vote. So already, Roy Moore started off better. And what's interesting, if you remember back when I said that Doug Jones on the Democrat side, he got 109,000 votes. Luther Strange, who came in second place, got 138,000 votes. So already, based on primary numbers, it wouldn't
They'll
matter.
win.
It's not going to matter who ends up advancing. The Republican is going to win. And so all it really matters is, where does the votes of the other people that were running in the Republican primary go? And there was one poll that was released earlier today to where a guy by the name of Larry Schweikert on Twitter, who is I've been following him for a very long time. His analysis is spot on, especially with his polling numbers that he released and talks about it. And there was a new poll that came out that shows that Roy Moore actually has almost a 20-point lead over Luther Strange in the runoff election. So, you can obviously figure out what that means. At least according to the polling, it looks like Roy Moore is going to win. Now, I certainly hope Roy Moore wins. It would help Trump out more. But yeah, what do you have to think about that?
More would help Trump more. That's all I gotta say.
Yeah, you get more with more. So
let's move on to the next thing here, though. So Trump has signed the VA Choice and Quality Employment Act. Now, this was a bipartisan bill similar to the what was it that came out recently? The Department of Veteran Affairs Accountability and Whistleblower Protection Act. Bobby, you want to give us some details on this bill in particular?
Sure. So Trump signed the VA Choice and Quality Employment Act, and it was actually, I believe it was as he was signing that was when that big press conference happened where he made those statements about Charlottesville, right?
I believe so.
Yeah. So the new law provides targeted reforms that are tailored to meet the requirements of a single department. In this case, the emphasis on hiring. Now, we're reading, and there's a list of bullet points, so we'll quickly go through these. So a few of the things that this one actually does is it expands the authority to declare shortage category positions. It has an executive management fellowship program to enable training of VA employees in the private sector and employees for their private sector to train in the VA. So you're really kind of mixing private sector together with the VA the way it kind of
to have more quality of individuals in the VA.
Right. It seems like it's making it less government involved, sort of. You kind of get what I'm saying with that.
Yeah.
It also has annual performance plans for political appointees, reapportionment of former VA career and career conditional employees in a position one grade higher than they last held. I guess it looks like people are getting, what's the word?
A boost in position.
Yeah, that's what it appears to be. It also has a technical expert career track that would allow advancement without the need to remove a supervisory position. It accepted service appointments of students and recent graduates, leading to conversation to a career conditional appointment.
Which, that in particular is one of the best things that comes from this, because the VA has struggled to get individuals under the age of 30 to work for them, so they are able to now pick better talent out of individuals that have just left college.
Right. So, I agree with you on that one. The next one is the establishment of a recruiting database covering every vacancy in the department with the ability to select applicants for positions other than the one for which had originally applied. So that would make it a lot easier
More
to fill
flexibility in hiring.
Exactly right. It also has training for human resources professionals at the VA. The Veterans Health Administration on how to best recruit and retain employees of the Veterans Health Administration, including with respect to any recruitment and retention matters that are unique to the VA under current laws. Also has the standardized exit surveys to be voluntarily completed by career and non-career employees and executives of the department who voluntarily separate, and also the expansion of direct hire authority for positions where there is a shortage of highly qualified candidates.
Yeah. So all this stuff is just a continuation of Donald Trump's promise to reform the VA, which has been a problem area for quite a while. This also comes off the heel of, as I mentioned, the Department of VA Accountability and Whistleblower Protection Act, which do you remember we talked about that, like 2 or 3 months ago when it came out?
Yeah, that was a while back.
I believe it was like it allowed them to fire individuals that were, in trouble for
because
whatever.
The way it had used to be is if someone had something in trouble, there was like a mandatory 30-day waiting period before they could be fired, and they got rid of that, so people who are bad could be fired immediately. This one, like you said, it has a lot more to do with hiring of people, making sure that the best candidates, no matter who they are, can be hired and can be put into the correct position, even if A, they didn't apply for it, or B, they didn't even apply at all.
Yeah.
So that kind of appears what it looks like.
So, not major things in regards of like how it affects the country, but this kind of stuff does affect how our veterans' health is, taken care of. So, yeah, it's good and important stuff.
It's one of those things where, it doesn't majorly affect the entire country. However, it's little baby steps like this here and there that start making especially government agencies like the VA better in general. And it takes time to implement, but once it's fully implemented and it kind of goes through its natural process, years down the line you realize how much better it actually is.
Yeah. Let's get into the next thing that we have here, and that is in regards to Debbie Wasserman-Schultz and her IT that we have talked about. I believe we talked about 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
The Arwans.
Yeah, the Arwan brothers. So he was originally charged, keep in mind, with a single count of bank fraud. And now he has finally been formally indicted. Now on 4 counts, including conspiracy and making false statements. So this kind of goes along with the events that happened after he was arrested at the airport trying to flee the country. His wife apparently has also been indicted as well. So this is one of those things that, like we said, this is kind of I'm not really going to call it a conspiracy per se,
but it's tied to
scandal.
DNC corruption,
and it's falling, and it's blowing up in their faces right now. So we knew this would happen. We knew that they would expand the investigation, which they've been doing, and this is just a part of that process. So we'll see where that goes from there. But it's one of those things we'll keep you updated with what's going on.
Let's get into some stuff we got on the economy. The first thing that we wanted to get into is household debt is at a record high. You want to get into the specifics for it, Bobby?
Yeah, sure, I will. So it appears that household debt has reached a new record high of $12.8 trillion in the second quarter, which is being driven by rising mortgage debt. Which is a stronger quarter for auto loan originations, and also an uptick in credit card balances, which reached their highest level since 2009. It also marks the 12th consecutive quarterly increase in household debt. Now, this isn't something that you can really blame on the Trump economy, especially when you look at that last statistic there of the...
This has to do with individuals.
The 12th consecutive quarterly increase in household debt. As the economy has been getting better since 2009... as the economy gets better, people are more willing to go out there and spend money. They're more willing to go out there and buy houses, buy cars, buy things with their credit cards. So that's one of the things that I guess you could say bad about a good economy is it leads to more personal debt. And like I said, it's not something that's totally Trump's fault. It's something that's been growing for 12 consecutive quarters, so that's 4 years now. So I'm sorry, is that 3 years? I'm sorry, 3 years. So it also says that the total debt figure is 67% of the second quarter's nominal GDP. So if you think about the total U.S. debt to U.S. GDP, it's like 100 and something percent. So you want to worry about it when it starts getting higher up numbers up there. So even though it's a record amount of debt, it's a lot of debt. It's not necessarily a problem unless people have problems paying back that debt, which is part of the reason that we had the whole, the subprime mortgage crisis back in 2007, 2008, because people took out loans for houses that they
could never cover. And the subprime mortgages, it wasn't a stable number, so they got in thinking that, I got this low interest rate on this loan, I can get this extravagant house, and they were handing out these loans like it was candy, but it has the adjustable rate on it, whereas it's popping up to high numbers, and they could never afford to pay these things, and so many people were defaulting.
Right, and this is kind of this data that we're looking at. No, it's Now it's kind of going more off of just the total number, total dollar value of the debt that's outstanding among the public. So if it starts to reach a problem where people aren't able to pay the debt back, that's when you really have to start worrying. At least as of right now, with interest rates so low as they've been, people, as the economy has gotten better, as they've gotten more money, they haven't had as much of a problem with paying it back. So I am worried. I'm not going to lie. Anytime you have a large amount of public debt like that, it's a problem. But yeah, we'll see where that goes as well. And it'll probably keep growing. If it's had a 12th consecutive quarterly increase, it'll probably be bigger the next quarter.
Yeah.
And if you remember, next quarter has September and October in there. And September and October, historically, no matter what year it is, are always the worst months for the stock market. Back in the crash in 1929, the crash that happened in the late 1980s, in 2001, 2008, that all happened in October. October is the month where bad things happen. So if you're one of those people that does believe that the market is headed for a downturn, look for October to be that month. I personally think, I actually do think it's going to go down a little bit. We've had all these record highs. I don't think it's going to be an ultimate crash, just based off of the really good economic indicators that we have, which we're going to get into here in a second. So,
let's get into the next thing that we have here, though.
Just to finish off my point, I do think it's going to go down a little bit here in September and October. I don't think that's going to be I don't think that's something that people should use to be like shouting doom and gloom for the Trump administration. Oh, this economic worries, it's dooming your presidency. I'm just saying, yeah, I do think it's going to go down. Don't panic unless it crashes.
Yeah. So the next thing that we wanted to get into is the feds have now collected a record amount of taxes through July, both in individual income taxes and payroll taxes for the first 10 months of fiscal year 2017. Want to give us some specifics for that, Bobby?
I do. So this is the fiscal year 2017, October 1st through the end of July. According to the monthly Treasury statement, through July, the federal government collected approximately $1.3 trillion in individual income taxes, at the same time collecting $976 billion in Social Security and other payroll taxes. Now, it said prior to this, in fiscal year 2015, held the previous record for individual income tax collections, and that was 1.309. This year was 1.312. So slightly higher. Yes, it is a record, but if you look at the chart data that they have for 2015, 2016, and 2017,
it's generally about the same.
It's generally about the same. So yeah, the Trump administration, like we said, we had in the midweek show, we were talking about tax reform. Tax reform is going to be the next big issue that Congress is going to look to tackle once they get back from their August recess here. And, we talked about that in our midweek, so if you want to hear us talk about that, you can listen to that.
Which I feel like we did a pretty thorough job on.
I believe we did. But, if tax reform does happen, with tax cuts means you're going to be bringing in less revenue. So that income tax record that they set, I doubt it would get broken for year 2018 if tax reform actually goes through and you collect less revenue. So, yeah, it's just interesting that, even as we're looking to cut taxes, we're still bringing in record amounts of revenue, which I guess is part of the reason why the national debt is down $100 billion since Trump's got into office. There was a thing I read today. It said that the debt has now gone down for a longer period of any president in history.
Which, you never hear people talk about.
No, that's the one thing no one ever talks about. Even if you watch like CNBC, who tends to be very market-oriented and economically business-oriented, they never mention that either. But
it is a very important thing that, if people start doubting you on your support for Donald Trump, that's an important thing you can actually point to and which he's able to do so far in his administration.
You rarely even hear about like libertarian-type people mentioning that either.
Yeah, they don't give him the credit he deserves. Let's go into the next thing that we have here out of the Atlanta Federal Reserve. They're predicting for the third quarter a 3.7 GDP growth, which is pretty good.
That's massively good. People were thinking that, remember, Barack Obama was the only U.S. president in history who did not deliver a single year of 3% or more economic growth.
For any quarter.
Yeah, for any quarter at all. In fact, he averaged less than 2% growth in his years in office. So economic-wise, even though the economy definitely did improve since 2009, it didn't really do that much. It had a steady growth period, is what
Which
happened.
I feel like people over-attribute, oh, he fixed the economy. If you have a growth rate of that, you didn't do much.
Yeah, especially the downturn that thing took back in 2008. If you look at just percentages, anything skyrocketing after that should be very large growth, at least for that first couple of years. But no, it was very slow. I'll give him credit, though. It was slow and it was steady. It's not good, but it wasn't bad either.
I think the economic stimulus package really set him back. I mean, it was such a dumb thing to do.
But, people have been talking about having Trump as a business-friendly, economically oriented president. You watch this economy just completely skyrocket and explode. And that's pretty much what's been happening ever since he got into office. We've had very good GDP numbers ever since then. Now, if you remember back, most GDP numbers are reevaluated several quarters down the line, just as more information and data is inputted. So even though this is the prediction, if it does end up being 3.7%, it is possible that the other quarters previously might be revised upwards as well. As this one, we don't know. So if this quarter is this good, and the final quarter of the year, which tends to be pretty good with all the,
Christmas shopping
and stuff. I mean, as much as people like to hate on corporatism and Christmas shopping, there's a reason they call Black Friday, because they make so many sales.
They go in the black.
Most companies are in debt, have spent more money than they've taken in up to that point of the year. It's the Christmas shopping season that saves companies and makes them profitable. So yeah, that's entirely correct. And I'm very interested to see how well the Christmas shopping season is this year with Trump as president.
Which, a predicted 3.7 GDP growth, the ideal, what you're always supposed to aim for, is 3% GDP growth. That's a good number.
2.5 to 3.
2.5 to 3. Even amongst the instability of the Trump administration, which I will admit, it has been a very unstable ride up to this point. You can get numbers like that. It's insane. Imagine if people were actually behind Donald Trump. He was getting the support that he needs to give the American public who voted for him, the kind of results he wants to give them, what kind of GDP growth we could have.
I mean, some people are saying that even 5% isn't too far off the realm of possibility at this point. I don't think it would be that high, at least not in this first year or so. But down the line, if he can get some stuff passed, get some legislation through, continue to cut regulations, see where things go, I wouldn't be surprised if you hit 4%.
It's really not as outlandish as it seems, even though 4% is amazingly good.
Oh yeah,
to
for
do.
an economy. I mean, if you think about it, the average inflation rate, as much as people like to hate on the Federal Reserve, one of the main things they do is to try to keep the inflation rate low, because high rates of inflation is not good for an economy. It's not good for a country. So keeping it around a steady 2% or so growth is one of the main things that they try to do, and that's one of the things that they have been very successful in, at least in recent years. So one of the big problems, though, of having a very fast-growing economy is you have rising interest rates. And that's something that is a problem in such a growth. The thing that makes this entire situation with Trump different is we haven't seen massive increases in the inflation rate. So even the Federal Reserve, when they were talking about that, when they were predicting that growth, they said this is kind of uncharted territory. There aren't that many times where you see low unemployment numbers and low inflation growth and a very strong GDP growth at the same time.
And a lowering of the overall debt in the country.
Yeah, it's uncharted territory. It's never happened before. They don't really know exactly what's going to happen in the future. They don't really know, if you see patterns, you can understand where things are going and know what moves to make. They're not quite sure what moves to make, so they're just using their best judgment to do what they possibly can do. And so, 3.7%. I'm very happy about that.
Yeah, really, really good stuff. Let's get into the next thing that we have here, and that is we've started talks on renegotiating NAFTA, which is one of the big things Donald Trump was running on.
Yeah, this is one of those things that there's not too much information that's been released, but we did want to mention it, that the negotiations or at least the renegotiations with NAFTA between the U.S., Mexico, and Canada have officially begun. They said it's actually off to a pretty rocky start so far, but, I would expect it to be off to a pretty rocky start. It's not something that's just going to have smooth sailing all the way through it. So that's pretty much all we wanted to mention right there about that, though.
Yeah. One thing I just want to comment on quickly before we move on, since there isn't really anything to report on, is the big goal that we want to do through renegotiation of NAFTA is reducing our trade deficit. One of, I won't say it's my favorite book I read last year, but it was one of the more informative books I read last year, was a book by Ian Fletcher called Free Trade Doesn't Work, which, is kind of a stance that most people on the right don't normally take. Now, I believe that free trade is good when it's beneficial to us, but the thing that people don't realize is with our current trade deficit, equivalency is about a drain on our economy of about 12% in growth. Now, to put that in perspective, that's about the size of the GDP of Canada. So if we were better about fixing our trade deficit, we could see our economy grow substantially more. And, the trade deficit comes from things like us spending more on products from Mexico than Mexico spends on products from us, which, that also plays into factors of us getting back factories here in the United States as opposed to going back to Mexico, which, we've been doing a fairly good job on so far in the Trump administration. But, yeah, I'm very interested in see how the talks on this stuff goes. I know Trudeau in Canada has been pretty favorable to renegotiating NAFTA. Nieto in Mexico, not so much.
No, but I guess with that we can then move on to the next story that we have.
Yeah, the last thing that we have here for the economy.
The next thing we have is that this week, though, was not a good week for the stock market. Now, the reason why, a lot of it does have to do with Trump's statements regarding, what happened in Charlottesville, and also with Steve Bannon leaving. In fact, the markets actually went up when Steve Bannon announced he was resigning, which is kind of interesting. I wouldn't think it would, but we've been talking about all these good economic numbers that we've had recently, and in a normal economy, good economic numbers like that would be what would keep the market high rolling. But I was talking to you before the show about this, that the main reason why the markets are dropping is because of uncertainty and instability. So when Trump is trying to have his pro-growth agenda, if people don't like him, or if people criticize him, it makes it for him at least a lot harder to get done what he wants done. And for traders and market-oriented people and investors, they see that as saying, I'm not sure if we're actually going to be able to get tax reform done. I'm not sure if we're actually going to be able to get it done as easily, or I'm not sure if we're going to be able to get it done in the time frame that we thought it would get done. And so because of this uneasiness, this unnerving trembling you have, the markets go down.
Yeah.
Now, if you look at just overall the numbers, it didn't crash or anything. I mean, the market topped out.
It's not crazy numbers of drops.
The market topped out at about 22,100 or so points like a week or 2 weeks ago. It's down to around 21,700. So a 400-point decline in 2 weeks, normally that's pretty bad. Percentage-wise, it's only down maybe 1% or so. Yeah, it's bad that it's going down. I'm not going to lie. I don't like the fact that it's going down. Trump needs to fix this problem. He needs to, get stuff done to get the markets back on track. Yeah, so...
and this all hinges on if we can get tax reform done. That is the most important thing.
If tax reform is unable to get done, I would predict the market would have a severe reaction to that. Very, very bad. And, it'd be funny if it happened in October, because that's when it normally goes down anyways. But yeah, so...
Not good stuff, but I don't think it's reason to cause alarm.
And another one of the reasons why it went down was because there was a rumor circulating that Trump's chief economic advisor, Gary Cohn...
was going to resign.
Was going to resign. Now, there's no indication that he's actually going to resign.
Well, Cohen, he made a statement today. There's so many people calling for him to resign. He said, no, I'm going to stay in my own position. I want to continue to serve my country.
Right, exactly. And so Cohen, much like how Bannon was kind of, Trump's policy, he was the guy he was in Trump's ear about policy. Cohen has been in Trump's ear about economics this entire time. And so that's one of the reasons it went down, is because saying, if he resigns, what's going to happen here? Again, uncertainty. So at least, with him making that statement, I would expect this week, as long as nothing drastic or bad happens this week,
it should go back
I would
up.
expect it to at least by the end of the week have a positive rise from Monday to Friday. Even if it might go down one day, go up another day. That happens every day in the markets. There's going to be up days and down days no matter what's going on in the outside world.
As long as we can have a quieter and more stable week this week as opposed to this last week that we have.
Right.
And yeah, this did happen because of the Charlottesville comments for the most part.
Yeah.
But
so
I feel like that situation's kind of dying down in the fire that's coming from it. So
right. So another thing that we don't actually have listed in our list, but I would like to note, is that if anyone's been following the price of Bitcoin, it's actually kind of skyrocketed here recently. It topped out earlier this week. I think it's at like $4,300 or so. It's down to about $4,100 right now. But, they had that big split earlier in the month with Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash. Some people thought it was going to crash. Some people thought it was going to skyrocket it. And there was a couple of days where every morning I would check it and be like, wow, it's at 4,000. Wow, it's at 41. Wow, it's at 42. But like I said, that's also kind of come down recently as well. So if you're following Bitcoin, it's one of those situations where you don't really want to buy anymore because it's kind of at the top price, but I don't really want to sell it either because I feel like it still might go higher. So I'm just holding tight with what I have.
yeah, I have no Bitcoin, so I gotta take your word for it. But I do know that the prices have been going up on Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Let's get into the one story that we have here for science and technology. I know you're the one that put this up, but this is in regards to the wreck of the USS Indianapolis, which has been found after 72 years now.
Yep. So the USS Indianapolis was a World War II ship that was struck by I believe they said it was struck by a torpedo back near the end of World War II. And yeah, it was lost on July 30th, 1945 in the final stretch of the war. Torpedoed by Japanese forces, had 1,200 service members on board when it went down. It said it sank after 12 minutes, and this is one of those things where it's kind of a really sad story, where it had 1,200 service members on board. 800 were able to escape the craft before it sunk. However, of those 800, before they were rescued, only 300 survived. Because if you think about it, they were floating out there in like rafts and stuff in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Or at least, out in the Pacific Ocean to the point where they couldn't get back to land. Hot sun of July bearing right down on them for days and days upon end. A lot of those guys pretty much baked to death. So it's a very, very sad moment, but they didn't know where the actual location of the ship was. And 72 years later, it's finally found. So, I'm sure they'll now be able to explore the shipwreck, figure out what happened, maybe, do what people normally do with shipwrecks, try to pay respects to those who have fallen there, explore it, figure out what happened, and yeah, so that's just something that we wanted to mention has happened in the world. I'm glad that it's been found, and maybe some of those families can now be finally laid to rest.
Yeah. With that said, let's get into some immigration.
Open the door! Immigration!
La migra, vamos, niños!
This week in immigration.
So, the first thing that we wanted to get into immigration is some statistics we got now on the RAISE Act. If you don't remember what the RAISE Act is, it is the, pretty much a complete overhaul on our immigration system, changing from the current Hart-Celler Act that we enacted in 1965 to change ourselves into a point-based system. This was unveiled, 2 weeks ago?
This was 2 weeks ago, yeah.
Yeah, let's get into some of the statistics that we have on this. So, one thing that people don't realize is how costly low-skilled immigration is to the United States. For example, and this is considered legal immigrants. According to some numbers we have out of the Heritage Foundations, which was given in a testimony before the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform, on average, for every dollar a legal immigrant, low-skilled labor immigrant pays when they have less than a high school degree, they receive $4 in government services back. So that is hugely costly to us. But under the RAISE Act, we just wouldn't be accepting these people. Do you got some more things on this, Bobby?
I do, and it actually kind of goes with what you were saying. So, of those low-skilled immigrants with a high school degree or less currently reside in the U.S., there's 12.8 million of them. It says that the households headed by these low-skilled legal immigrants impose a net fiscal cost, meaning, total benefits received minus total taxes paid. Net fiscal cost $150 billion a year.
You could pay for a lot of walls with that.
If a $30 billion wall, you could buy 5 walls with that.
Yeah.
That's also the equivalent to a $1.04 tax on every gallon of gas purchased by U.S. motorists every year for the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
That's how much money that is.
So what is happening, and we're talking about legal immigration, not illegal. Yeah. We're pretty much subsidizing these corporations which bring in these low-skill immigrants. And, they benefit and they get to drop the wages of the overall American workers. So it is very dire that we get the RAISE Act, one of the most important things that Donald Trump could ever do in his administration. But you got some more things for us on this, Bobby?
Yeah, they said based off of the National Academy of Sciences estimates, the average low-skill immigrant with a high school degree or less who enters the country imposes a net present value in taxpayers of negative $142,000 a year. Individually. $142,000 a year per immigrant.
Think of all the free college you could give out for that.
Most people don't even make $142,000 a year. Most people, a minimum wage earner only earns not even $40,000 a year. It's insane.
Yeah. So, with the RAISE Act, if this was to be passed, it would cut legal immigration by about half, which is something I want. I recently took a little short quiz on the RAISE Act to see if I would be able to be someone that could be admitted to the United States under the RAISE Act. And, I wouldn't be allowed in the United States as a legal immigrant under the RAISE Act. I would not qualify under the point-based system. So it is a very strict system, but it is long overdue. And this would be the first overhaul in immigration in about half a century.
Yeah, not only that, they said that there was a rough estimate of future net outlays to be paid by taxpayers, and this is in 2012 dollars, I might add, for low-skilled immigrants, appears to be around $397,000 per immigrant over 75 years. Yeah.
Those are staggering numbers. Think of all the families that we could provide for in this country if we weren't paying out to these immigrants. Legal immigrants, I might add. Legal immigration is a huge problem in addition to illegal immigration.
Over the last decade and a half, an average of 470,000 low-skilled adult immigrants, both legal and illegal, have arrived in the U.S. each year. The net present value of this inflow is negative $67 billion per year.
Something else. These numbers are so dramatic, but the leftists out there are so heartstring pulled to this, they can't realize that this is keeping them from ever getting to pass anything that they would want to pass. I'd be okay with some of these things that Democrats advocate for if we could actually afford these things, but we can't when we are relenting ourselves to the harms of legal and illegal immigration.
Yeah, and also it goes on to say that by limiting future low-skill immigration, the RAISE Act could save at least $1 trillion a year.
Man.
Yeah, it says the future net outlays, which is benefits given less taxes paid, for the inflow of 4.7 million low-skilled immigrants would be around $1.9 trillion.
Those are some big numbers.
Yeah. I mean, the U.S. only spends like 4 or 5 trillion a year at most.
Yeah, in their fiscal budget.
In their fiscal budget. So, we're talking, huge percentages of the U.S. fiscal budget that's going towards legal and illegal immigration.
And what were we... I know this is a little side tangent, but last week we were talking about some numbers on the cost to deport all of the illegal aliens in this country against giving them amnesty. That was like last week or the week before, wasn't it?
Yeah, I remember hearing us talking about that.
And it would cost like 4 times more to give amnesty instead of deporting every single illegal alien. If we were able to deport all these illegal aliens, in addition to passing the RAISE Act, so we're not letting all these low-skilled immigrants, this country would be one hell of a prosperous country, and, we would be securing the blessings of... we would secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, as the Constitution says.
To ordain and establish this Constitution of the United States of America. I have that memorized, Enzo. I have the preamble memorized since the 3rd grade.
So, we'd be fulfilling that in a way which we haven't done in a long time.
Yeah. So,
we don't talk about the Constitution a lot, but that's my favorite quote.
Yeah,
that's the only thing I remember from the Constitution.
I remember a lot. I love the Constitution, Enzo. So
let's get into the next thing that we have on immigration here, and that is in regards to the feds are now beginning mental evaluations for illegal aliens seeking asylum. You got the specifics on that for us, Bobby?
I always have the specifics on everything. So, federal immigration authorities have agreed to allow outside groups more freedom to conduct telephone medical screenings of detained illegal immigrants to help them make their asylum cases. So this is a lot of the guys that, the illegal immigrants that have been arrested, who then try to obtain legal status in this country. So, normally they go through like lawyers and stuff like that. But now, they now have the ability to provide mental evaluations. So if there are any crazy ones, we're not letting them in either. That sounds
Which seems like a generally good like rule of thumb.
Yeah.
Why weren't we doing this before?
But they said the ICE instituted the new policy. I think that it's actually been kind of a while, but it first suddenly got out now. But they said ICE has also agreed to let a legal assistant working within the illegal immigrants back into one of their Texas facilities. So right here in the home state, Enzo, that's where they're first testing this out. So hopefully none of the crazies of the illegal immigrants are the ones who actually make it through.
Yeah, well, they can, they can try, but I mean, we're gonna send them back.
Yeah, what's funny is they're actually providing these telephone-based mental exams. They're starting with the women and the children. So,
well, women and children.
I mean, hey, when the Titanic was sinking, they said women and children first. So you might as well go with women and children first.
Women and children first for the deportations. I don't really care. You can.
I mean, they don't.
Everyone's going back. Might as well go back
if you're
first.
gonna get rid of the illegal immigrants, you might as well get rid of the ones who statistically aren't working first, right?
Yeah, they aren't. Yeah, they're the biggest.
I mean, even though we had the data last week, or I think it was the week before, where they said that half of the construction workers in Texas are illegal immigrants. Those aren't women we're talking about.
No. So
if you're gonna deport everyone, let them finish building the houses and then deport them. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So you're going back.
Yeah. So
let's get into the next story that we have here, which is super ultra triggering. That I just wanted to put in there because I want people to remember that this is a very serious thing, illegal immigration in regards to just safety for the American public, and that is a story out of Utah. There was a prior deported illegal alien who has now been arrested that has raped a 7-year-old in the period of half a year over 1,000 times. You want to give us the specifics on this story, Bobby?
Enzo, he claimed it was an accident because the lotion made him slippery.
Oh, God.
Victor Francisco Michael Lara. You always got to worry about those people with hyphenated last names.
Yeah.
32
There's
years
something
old.
always wrong with those kind of people.
32 years old. Faces first-degree felony charges of rape of a child for the girl who was 7 years old after they revealed the disturbing details at the Children's Justice Center. They said he molested her and raped her thousands of times over the course of a half year. Doing the math for that, Enzo. 365 days in a year. Half that's what, 180?
Roughly, I don't know.
That's like, you know...
Multiple times a day.
That's, you know, not 10 times a day, but... God, like 5 to 10, 7 times a day? I'm not sure if that math is exactly correct, but...
Way too many. Way too many. Okay, one was a
7-year-old girl that many times a day. But he's an illegal immigrant, you know, living in Utah. And you got to remember back to what Trump said.
It's time to go back.
They're bringing drugs. They're bringing crime. They're rapists.
They
This
are
guy
rapists.
is a rapist. He's a child molester.
Someone's doing the raping.
He deserves even worse than deportation in my book. I mean, this is the type of thing where, in my opinion, that's just straight death penalty. For raping a 7-year-old girl thousands of times, like, you know. I love the Constitution. You have to go through trial by jury. But when it's said and done, like...
Whoa. Foreign nationals don't need court hearings.
Exactly my point, Enzo.
They can just go back.
Don't even send them back to Mexico. Drop them off in, like, Antarctica.
Somewhere else.
Drop them off in, like, Antarctica and just be like, here...
Antarctica.
If you're going to rape something, rape a penguin or something. See how far that gets you before a seal eats you.
Oh, God. But yeah, this story, when I first read it, it triggered me pretty well. You know, I read Ann Coulter's Adios America, and like when you get in the middle of that book, it's just rape story after rape story after rape story of like, you know, 3 and 4-year-olds and like 6-year-olds, and like, yeah, this stuff's actually happening a lot. Just people, you know, close their eyes to it. Like Donald Trump says, they're bringing rapists. Someone's doing the raping. You know, you look at the problems with at the border. You know, there's statistics, it's around like 7 in 10 women that cross the border get raped at some point when they're crossing the border. Why are we going to leave this thing open? Why are we letting all these goddamn rapists in? Okay, let's protect our goddamn women and children in this country. Ugh. But no, the liberals on the left, even though they're, you know, trying to fight rape culture, no, we got to let everyone in. We got to have the most porous border in the world because we owe these people something. No, we don't. Okay? The only thing we owe you if you come here is a fucking bus trip back. I'm sorry for the F, but it happens. But, yeah, let's go into the last story that we have here, which is about as triggering as just what we had to go over. But the American Bar Association is now allowing illegal aliens to practice law.
You skipped an article there.
Oh, yeah, I did. Let's go into this one anyways, and then go back to that. I'm sorry on that.
Yeah, that's perfectly fine. So yeah, the American Bar Association is now allowing illegal immigrants to practice law. Like, that sounds like something that shouldn't happen, but it's true. So the American Bar Association House of Delegates passed a resolution Monday recommending that illegal immigrants who wish to take the bar exam and practice law should not be dismissed because of their immigration status. And apparently it passed.
Even though it's not legal for them to work in this country.
Yeah. But like, oh no, you can take your bar exam. I mean, any person taking the bar exam, you know, I'm not entirely sure how the process works for people who want to take their bar exams. But I would assume that if there are illegal immigrants taking the bar exam, someone's not going to be able to take the bar exam. Now, like I said, I'm not sure how true that statement is. If I'm wrong, you know, correct me. But they shouldn't be allowed to take the bar exam if they're illegal in this country. Like, take it in your own country, okay? Send it back.
Go make your country great again with your superior law skills.
What's even worse is California passed a law back in 2013 allowing illegal immigrants the right to practice law. So, yeah.
This is like clown world stuff.
They want out of this country. I say let them out. Or you know what? How about we just send all the illegals to California? Don't even allow California to secede. Forcibly kick them out and say you deal with it. You want it to happen, go ahead. So, yeah, that's all I have to say about that. So,
yeah. But let's get into that last story that I accidentally skipped over on you. And that is we got some reports that are showing some claims that if mass migration was left unchecked, it could cause an outbreak of deadly disease in this country. You got the specifics for us, Bobby, on that?
I do. So, new research by the Federation for American Immigration Reform, or FAIR, has outlined how the Trump administration could further protect the American public from diseases brought by U.S. immigrants. So, they said, communicable diseases do not stop at international borders. They could be one of the most dangerous, yet rarely considered consequences of inadequate immigration controls. Nevertheless, the mainstream media and most policymakers avoid any discussion of the public health challenges presented by illegal immigration. However, in a world where rapid global travel is both accessible and affordable to large numbers of people, the possibility of an epidemic traceable to migrants is a reality that cannot be ignored. They continue to say most illnesses are spread by contact with infected people, livestock, or agricultural produce. As a result, researchers have concluded that the international movement of people is a significant factor in disease outbreak. Mobile populations can link zones of disease emergence to low prevalence or non-endemic areas through rapid or high volume international movements, or both. So, this has a lot more to do with just migration in general rather than illegal immigration. But the point still stands that with the ability of people to just fly anywhere in the world,
and you're not checking it
without being checked, for people just to cross borders, for people to go where they want, when they want, for however long they want, the spread of diseases across continents is becoming more and more commonplace.
Which this has happened before in the past. There's been outbreaks from illegal aliens of polio or cholera or typhus, diseases which pretty much don't even exist in this country, but are being reintroduced in this country because these, third world mass migration immigrants are coming here, are coming back and infecting our own citizens. Okay, we have a duty to protect our own. And the refusal to do that is negligence of the highest order of our government officials.
If you remember back in 2014, when there was the whole big Ebola outbreak, that's something, that disease...
That's the kind of stuff we're talking about.
Exactly. That disease had never even been to North America or the Western Hemisphere ever until we brought those people over here to treat them. And even one of the doctors in Dallas, she got it. She contacted Ebola from that. Without mass migration, the way that we have it today, stuff like that would never happen. I mean, even if you want to go back centuries beforehand, look at what happened when, colonizers started coming over from Europe. The indigenous populations, they got sick with lots of the diseases, and a lot of them died out because of it. And so, this isn't something that's new, but it is something that's completely obvious to anyone who actually kind of understands where these things are coming from.
And, the refusal to acknowledge this is just, idiotic and simplistic because you have emotional connections towards bringing all of these people in.
Yeah.
But, you value these people more than the American citizens living here, which is kind of traitorous. So, I don't really care about your opinion on this. Let's get into the bottom of the stack stuff we have for national news, then we can get into current year college craziness. The first thing that we have here is something I know that's very dear and near to your heart.
Oh, yes.
And that is the Kid Rock campaign for Senate out in Michigan.
Yeah.
There's some specifics on that you want to get into, though, that are very interesting.
These specifics that we have here. So there's a possibility that Kid Rock might not be able to run for Senate. However, his real name, Robert Ritchie, is the one who might actually have to be able to. Because there's rules regarding names that are allowed to be on the ballot, and the rules for up there in Michigan say that people with nicknames, the nickname pretty much has to be extremely close to what their actual name is. So, like, if your name is Robert, you can go by Bobby, because that is
which is what you actually do.
Yeah, which is what I actually do. So, it's one of those things where, like, it's a, what do you call it? A commonly recognizable nickname of a name is
like
pretty
William
much,
and Bill or something.
like William and Bill, Robert and Bob, stuff like that. So, like, Bill Clinton, William Clinton, people go by Bill Clinton. He can go by Bill Clinton in the ballot. That's kind of where it's coming from.
Yeah.
But Kid Rock and Robert Ritchie are two completely different names, even though he always goes by Kid Rock. So it's one of those things where he might not be able to actually appear on the ballot as the name Kid Rock. So would he be?
But can he still have like yard signs that say Kid Rock?
That's the thing, though. He's going to be running as Kid Rock. So when people go to that ballot booth and are looking for Kid Rock, they're going to be like, where the hell's Kid Rock?
Yeah, if they don't know that Robert Ritchie's his real name, like, that might be a problem. Now, if he's the nominee for the Republicans, like, yeah, it'll be a little easier to tell, but yeah, that is like a circumstance which is like unique to him. But I guess he has to resolve himself.
Now, there is currently a petition. And Michigan law states that if that petition receives enough valid signatures to make the ballot and indicate that he wants to be listed as Kid Rock, then the Michigan Bureau of Election staff would have to research the question of whether that name would be allowed. But like I said, at an initial glance, it appears that that's not going to be the case. Now, I think that the state of Michigan would be very stupid to not allow this, because he's going to be running as Kid Rock. You might as well appear on the ballot.
That's what people know him as. That's the thing.
Even if he technically is named Senator Ritchie, run as Kid Rock. Or at least, be called Senator Kid Rock. I made the joke about people with hyphenated last names. Have him be two names. Senator Kid Rock. Not
Senator Kid
Smith,
Rock Ritchie.
Not Senator Smith, not Senator Cruz, not Senator Schumer. Senator Kid Rock. So I hope his name is actually able to appear on the ballot like that.
Yeah. But, what is it? Dabanow is the senator in Michigan. She's the Democrat that's running. Kid Rock is, like, our best possibility of getting her out, I believe, at this point.
Yeah, and I agree.
Debbie Dabanow.
We talked a lot about this on our midweek podcast several weeks ago when we went over the 2018 midterms. So if you want to hear us talk really into detail about that, you can listen to that episode.
Yeah. Let's talk about this next story, though, that I guess is pretty frustrating for us personally. Baltimore has voted to rid itself of 4 Confederate statues. You got the specifics for us, Bobby?
I do. So this is following the protests that have happened in other states, and a lot of it's over just the whole situation in Charlottesville. Again, a lot of the stories this week are in response to what happened there last weekend. But, we all kind of saw now what happened in in Durham, North Carolina, when those people took a Confederate statue and they literally dragged the thing down and started kicking it. Now,
there has been a lot of arrests since then because of it.
Yeah, I was just about to say that. Thankfully, a lot of them have been arrested. A lot of them have been identified. But Baltimore, in wanting to be as progressive as they did, they voted overnight to remove a bunch of the statues. And I think they actually did remove several of the statues overnight while everyone was sleeping. So when you wake up, was it 2 statues? Yeah, they removed them. And so they're gone. And all across the country now, it seems like the left is using this whole situation as a way to accelerate the removal of Confederate statues. Now, some states, I think like Kentucky, has been kind of reluctant to do it. I'm not sure how Texas has been doing it. Yeah.
I don't think there has been any in Texas so far. I know there's been protests in Dallas. There's been protests in San Antonio as well. But we do have a lot of Confederate monuments here in Texas.
We do. And so, so far...
We actually had one here in San Marcos be removed about a year or two ago.
Was that actually removed?
Yeah, it was.
I know there's one that got...
It was just the Daughters of Liberty, or Daughters of the Confederacy, little road highway marker that was taken down. It was actually vandalized by students here. It's pretty sickening.
Yeah, I remember when that happened. But it seems like Texas in general has been kind of, not really
as bad as other places.
Yeah, it's not
but,
as
like,
bad as other
this
places.
is just happening everywhere in the country now. People are going crazy about destroying statues. It's like they're freaking like anarchists in the Spanish Civil War destroying churches at this point. Like, it's crazy.
And I think one of the reasons why a lot of states are able to do it and some states aren't, if you look at
Alabama has laws actually against taking them down.
If you look at a state like Virginia's it's a blue state. I mean, I know it's technically
like
a swing
lean
state,
blue.
but like it's got Democrats in control of it. It's got Democrats controlling the cities, and the cities are the ones who have a lot of
McAuliffe's
control
the governor,
overruling these, over taking down these statues. So state government doesn't have as much say in it. And when you get these individual cities that are run by lots of Democrats, they're able to do it. So in a blue state like that, where there's less and less Republicans there, or at least not necessarily Republicans, but people who are wanting to keep up the statues, there's a lot more resistance. So places like that are able to do it, or places like Louisiana, especially New Orleans, where there is a heavy African American population,
where they did take down many
yeah,
statues there.
That's what I'm saying is, they're easier to do that. But when you get to places like Texas or Kentucky, that's not always the case. The people are a lot more reluctant to actually take them down. So that's part of the reason why, at least here, we haven't seen as many being taken down.
Which we also have a poll just to get a gauge of what the average American believes on these statues. This is a poll out of NPR, PBS NewsHour, and Morris. They conducted the poll amongst 1,125 U.S. citizens over the phone from August 14th and 15th.
Thank you for the details.
Yeah, and 62% of the people surveyed wanted the monuments to remain, while only 27% of the people wanted them removed. So it is a extremely vocal minority that wants these statues removed. There's just, I guess, not enough people standing up for these statues.
And a lot of it has to come down to what I was saying. It is a small minority that wants these statues removed, but they're all in very pocketed areas. And when you're in pocketed areas with a lot of control over that area, you're able to get away with doing things like that. But for the rest of the country, that's not the case. So yeah, stuff like this happens in Virginia. It happens in Louisiana. And when people band together, 27% of the country, that's still millions and millions, tens of millions of people. And all it takes is for 5 or 6 of them to get a rope and some trucks, throw it around a statue and tear it down. That's what happened in North Carolina. So yeah, you're right. It is a vocal minority, and it's kind of a, I don't really want to use the word militant or violent, but
you say radical, though. I believe that is a good
radical
descriptor.
is the case where the vast majority of Americans, it's kind of is the silent majority. They honestly just don't care, or they want them to stay, but they're not really going to go out there and fight people in the streets over it.
Yeah. So
that's kind of where you have this big disconnect there. So, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, I'm not from the South. I'm from the North. I'm from Wisconsin. My state fought against the South, but I've always been sympathetic to the Confederacy, and I don't want their history destroyed from them. And my thing is just, a lot of these statues were erected by the daughters of the Confederacy and whatnot because their loved ones went and fought in the Civil War, and they didn't come back.
Mm-hmm.
So the only thing that they had to honor them with is building these statues. So, who are we to desecrate that which was honored towards these people that lost their loved ones? I just think that's very disgusting to destroy. It's like on par with digging up bodies, which we have actually seen at this point.
Yeah, that's what they tried to do.
And the country's gone so crazy with destroying statues. They've desecrated statues which aren't even Confederate statues. Mm-hmm. The Lincoln Memorial has been, vandalized. There's Vice writing articles about destroying the Mount Rushmore. Blowing up Mount Rushmore, which, advocacy of that is like a crime.
And Trump had made a statement. He said, hey, are you going to go after the founding fathers next?
They
Washington owned slaves. Jefferson owned slaves.
People are calling for that right now.
And that's exactly what they're exactly doing. Yeah, they are trying to erase American history because it doesn't fit their progressive liberal agenda. And so I'm glad that there's a lot of people actually standing up against them. But, the next story that we wanted to get to is kind of ironic because, I know you and I don't really want to take down these statues. But a lot of people pointed out, they said, in the city of Seattle, there was a statue of Vladimir Lenin. And they said, why, if you're taking down these statues for the Confederates, why are you leaving up a statue of a communist who killed millions and millions of people?
Yeah.
And so the Seattle mayor actually agreed. He's like, yeah, we should probably take that thing down. So he ordered it to be taken down. I'm actually going to
This was like a thing like run by like Jack Posobiec. This was like his big cause in the week. I don't really generally like that guy. Hey, did you see like the videos of the protest for that?
Yeah, I saw.
Very weird.
They were very weird. It was very low energy, but
it's only like 12 people. It was strange.
I don't want any statues to be taken down. I don't want Confederate statues to be taken down. If you want to put up a Lenin statue in your private property, and it appears from what I've read,
this is on private property.
It is on private property. So if you want to put up a Lenin statue and be all communist on your own private property, just do it. Just don't do it out in public, and don't make me have to do anything that I don't want to do. Don't take down my statues on my public property. But I think it has drawn a very important issue that, hey, if you're taking down one side statue and leaving up the other side statue, you're no better than the people who you claim to be against.
Yeah.
So yeah, either leave up all the statues or take them all down. And I don't want to take any of them down. But if you're going to take them down, take them all down and, start with the bad people, a.k.a. the communists.
Yeah. With that said, let's go into the next thing that we have here is with some poll numbers. Some pretty interesting ones. A quarter of all Americans would follow Trump to the very end, while the same amount absolutely detest him to the very end. You got some specifics for us on that, Bobby?
I mean, it's, there's no surprise that that's something that's the case here. There does seem to be about 1 in 4 Americans who are super pro-MAGA, and another half of the country that's like, I hate you, Trump, no matter what you do. You could cure cancer. I'm still going to hate you for it. So it's completely, there is no surprise that,
And then you have the middle ground, which I feel like just doesn't want to talk about this stuff.
I think the middle ground just doesn't want there to be chaos. I mean, if someone actually tried to impeach Trump, there would be chaos in this country. If someone assassinated Trump, there would be chaos in this country.
It'd destroy the market if we tried to impeach him.
It would destroy everything. There would be riots in the streets from all sides. It would lead to a lot more bloodshed and death in this country. And that's what normal Americans, they don't want to see that happen. And yeah, a lot of people might not like Trump, but at the same time, they say, yeah, he is our president, and I want him to do the best job he possibly can. And that represents, according to this poll, at least about half the country.
It is out of Monmouth University in New Jersey. They did the poll. They also did some poll numbers on his approval rating. 49% of people surveyed disapprove of the job he's doing, while 41% of people approve of what he's doing.
And
so,
his approval rating has actually gone up ever since last week's
a couple more
North
points.
Korean situation.
I've seen numbers around 45, 46.
I tend to go with Rasmussen because I like their sampling size a bit better, and they had him at like mid-40s this week, and the whole Charlottesville,
which sounds about right.
The whole Charlottesville situation, it actually didn't really affect his polling numbers, and I have a pretty good theory as to why. The people who are calling him out aren't exactly people who like him to begin with, and the people who are defending him are the people who defended him to begin with. So
yeah, the people attacking were like John McCain, Marco Rubio, and Mitt Romney. Like, those guys hated Trump already.
Yeah,
they're not moving a needle.
So yeah, that understands why the needle didn't move, because you have the same two sides who've been fighting each other this entire time, continuing to fight each other. Yeah, it would make sense that Trump's going to do what Trump's going to do. If you're going to defend him, defend him. If you're going to call him out, call him out. But it doesn't affect his overall approval. And so, I've seen polling numbers that show his numbers are down to 34%, according to some polls, which I don't think that it's definitely not that low. It's absolutely definitely not that low. If anything, I think it's in the low 40s, 42, 43 at worst. But, as this economic data comes out and as the fallout over Charlottesville kind of subsides, and if he makes a good decision tomorrow about Afghanistan, or if the situation in North Korea continues to improve or at least not get any worse, I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of the month he's back up to 48, 49%.
Yeah, I don't really think that is out of the question at this point. But there are some other Rasmussen polls that we have here that I know you wanted to touch on.
I did, yes.
The first one is actually some establishment Republicans.
Yeah, so I'll read this one. So there was polling done among Republicans themselves about what they think of Mitch McConnell and what they think of Paul Ryan. And it said that 36% of Republicans want Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan to be gone. I tend to think that 36% of Republicans tends to be Trump's strongest base, because, McCain and Ryan, they hate Trump. They don't want Trump to succeed. And they're actively trying to derail him as much as they possibly can, while at the same time maintaining party presence. Only 17%, though, wanted them to stay.
My dad's one of them.
And I consider that to be the biggest section of never Trumpers that are out there. Those are the guys that, they're Republicans, but no matter what Trump does, they're going to hate him no matter what he does. The other roughly whatever percentage was just had really no opinion on that. And those tend to be just kind of like normal, regular, average, everyday
people that don't
Republicans.
really follow, I think, politics as closely as we do, to the point where like they have a strong disdain for Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan,
Yeah.
like we do. Or I guess people do like these guys. I mean, I know people that do, but
Well,
there's not many.
I mean, the polling was specifically, do you want them to stay or do you want them gone? So I feel like a lot of Republicans don't like them, but they don't really want them to leave either. You kind of get what I'm saying?
I don't know who would replace them. That's the thing.
Yeah, it would be like, who would you replace it with? In that indication, I can understand why people say, I don't like them, but I'm not sure what you would do if you tried to get them to leave. So I can understand where they're coming from. However,
Like if McConnell was just replaced with like Rubio, I would just stick with McConnell.
I mean, I think, I tend to be more favored of guys like Rand Paul or Ted Cruz or people like that, even though I do have problems with both
Like
of them.
maybe Tom Cotton or David Perdue. Any of those guys would be way better.
I would like David Perdue. I mean, he helped write the RAISE Act. We've seen David Perdue talk.
Yeah, we
person, so
have
that
in
would be pretty
Orlando.
cool. But yeah, I'm not really sure which Republican in the Senate would be someone to replace McConnell.
I don't know who I'd want to replace Paul Ryan with in the House.
I mean, there are plenty of people, I think, in the House that we could
Do
replace
Steve
him with.
King. Do Steve King. That would be amazing.
Oh, yeah, I would love that. But there was one more poll that we wanted to get to. And if there's been a lot of discussion about anonymous sources and stories and whether or not people believe it and whether or not they think it's true. And there was a polling done about people as to whether you believe stories that only rely on anonymous sources for information. Only 20% of likely voters trust stories that are completely reliant on anonymous sources.
Which is like most CNN articles
almost
at this
every
point.
single CNN or
Washington Post.
They're the worst. To a lesser degree, New York Times, but they're no saints in this matter either. 52% said they don't believe any stories at all that have anonymous sources,
So most people.
and the other 20% just are not sure. So yeah, you can say a majority of Americans don't trust these stories, and yet that's the stories that the fake news media continues to hammer out time and time and time again. So yeah, mainstream media, if you're listening, we're on to you. People don't trust you. By vast majority of numbers, they don't trust you.
Yeah. Let's go into some stuff I know you were eager to get into, which is related to Shia LaBeouf and his He Will Not Divide His Flags. You want to tell us the story on that, Bobby?
Oh, I want to tell you this story. So if you remember back months and months and months ago when Shia LaBeouf was having his whole He Will Not Divide Us BS that he was doing, we pretty much have driven him to insanity. At least the internet has. And so, but you know what? I'll give him credit. He's not giving up. That crazy loser ain't giving up. So he tried his newest event to where he just wanted to hang a He Will Not Divide Us flag on a wall and film it with a webcam for the remainder of Trump's presidency. So obviously the guys over at 4chan and Poll, they decided to say, hey, you know what? It's time to, dust off the old horse there and get back on the saddle. So they decided to try to find it this time. And they found it. This time, they set a record in how fast they found it. You want to guess how fast they found it, Enzo?
Like a day?
Less than 6 hours. Less than 6 hours. And all it was a live stream of a flag hanging on a wall. I'll tell you how they found it. First off, they noticed that there was natural light coming into the left side of the screen. So you figure it has to be daytime when it's there until nighttime when the lights are flicked on. So it has to be daytime in whatever part of the planet it's at. Well, when it was daytime in Europe. So they figured, okay, let's start in Europe to figure this thing out. Good thing, though, is they did get a tip that someone did see Shia LaBeouf in London earlier in the week. So they figured, okay, let's start in London and see what we can get. So what they did was they started having people just decide to drive around the city looking for open windows that were facing on whatever side of the street it was, because the sunlight was coming in from one angle. And what they did was they took a blue laser pointer and they would just shine the laser pointer in the window and see if anyone could see that laser pointer on the webcam. Within 6 hours of guys driving around the city, someone said, hey, I see the laser pointer in the window. They identified the address of the house that it was at. Boom, they got it. 6 hours. They identified the location of a flag hanging on a wall with the only indicator of where it's at being there's sunlight coming in the side.
That's so ridiculous.
You know, they make the joke about the weaponized autism, but it's kind of real. Like, you don't want to mess with these guys. They deserve
People with a lot of free time.
They deserve to go out and get their tendies.
Bunch of neats.
But I'm very happy with them. I approve.
There are neats, though.
I mean, they haven't actually kidnapped the flag yet or stolen it because it's on private property and you can't break into a house. But the fact that they found it, that's the most important part.
Yeah. Let's get into the next thing that we have here, which is extremely staggering when I first saw this. This is a thing out of Zero Hedge. 1 in 7 New York City public school students is homeless. You want to tell us some more about that, Bobby?
Oh, I wish I didn't have to, but yeah. So over the past 2 years, the population of homeless students in New York City's public schools has exploded, increasing by 20% between the 2015 and 2016 school year and the 2016-2017 school year, which concluded in June. There are now more than 140,000 homeless public school students, according to the Atlas of Student Homelessness, which is an annual study that's given. They said at any given time, roughly 9% of New York City public school students are homeless. That's terrible.
Yeah, that's staggering. That's really insane. I would have not known that is that bad. There's been 3 factors that have been pointed to, which are said to be the biggest cause of this rise in homelessness, and that is dwindling federal aid for housing insecure Americans, rising rents, and the closure of state-run renters assistance programs. So, yeah, it is just really sad, and I think it's something that people should know is going on.
And what's even worse is they said that there's some data that kind of goes along with that for students who are homeless during elementary school. They said that these students exhibit chronic absenteeism at 1.5 times the rate for students who don't struggle with housing insecurity. Not only that, but they said that they're at twice the risk of being suspended or held back a grade, and half of the proficiency of their 5th grade math and English language arts assessments of their peers.
So it permanently will set them back through this developmental period.
There's no way that a person is going to be able to recover later in life due to problems like that. So, you know, I'm not the biggest supporter of state-run housing or things like that. But at the same time, when you have 140,000 kids in New York, at any given time, 9% of your student population is homeless, knowing that this leads to greater problems in life, that should be something that you should be working on. That's how you make a country great again, is by making sure the education is good for your students and they don't have lingering problems the rest of their lives.
Yeah, we should do what we need to help those that are in the greatest need. I think that just goes without saying.
At the same time, I'm not saying take care of them for life. I'm saying give them a little push, a little boost to get themselves going. That's all I add.
Yeah, do what needs to be done. Let's move on to the next story, which I know you want to talk about just because it's super funny. And that is psychologists have now been overwhelmed with people suffering from a particular disease of sort, and that is Trump derangement disorder.
Yep. So obviously that's not the exact name for it, but that's pretty much what people are calling it. Or President Trump's stress disorder is also commonly named. So a lot of it is just people are suffering from political anxiety. You know, they make the joke that Trump lives rent-free in their heads. Well, it's true. Trump does live rent-free in these heads.
They have PTSD, post-Trump derangement syndrome.
Yeah, and we talked about this kind of earlier in the show, weeks back, maybe even months back, that like people were losing sleep because of Trump. Like that's all they could do, just lay at night being angry about Trump. And like,
I think
that's all they can think about. And it's
like journalists especially.
Well, I mean, they don't function like
the ones that I do know, like personally, the lefty Marxists, that they don't get a lot of sleep because of this stuff.
they don't function like normal people either, and we have the scientific data back.
Yeah, we talked about that months ago. But yeah, continue on.
But anyways,
stuff
like
here.
I was saying, these people, it's like they have trauma. So now they're starting to see psychologists or shrinks, really.
Must be good for that market.
Yeah. And
Trump's making America great again for them.
Yeah, thank you, Enzo. I'll continue with my point here. So they're pretty much saying that psychologists all across the country are just being overwhelmed with the number of people that are trying to get psychological help from shrinks because of President Trump. Like, he is literally driving these people crazy. I mean, on the bright side, if you're a shrink, you've got endless business, and you're probably you're getting rich off of these people. But yeah, I just wanted to bring that story up because I think it's hilarious that like not only these leftists, like they literally can't cope with their lives anymore. They have to see shrinks because of Trump.
Which like I hated Barack Obama, but like I wasn't like to this level.
Yes, but Enzo, you and I are rational human beings. We're talking about
I think they just
left here.
Yeah. I just think they just take it too seriously. Like, just remember at the end of the day, like, okay, you don't like Donald Trump, but like, he's not affecting you that much. Let's be serious.
Yeah.
Okay, the people that were like freaking like crying, shaking when he was elected, okay, maybe in that instance, like whatever. But
literally
these
shaking.
people are doing that like every day. And like what, we're like 200 days in?
Yeah, something like that.
It's insane.
So
let's get into the next thing that we have here, which is some pretty good news that is good for our chances in the 2018 midterms, and that is the DNC is really, really, really hurting for cash right now.
yeah, we've added the updated numbers pretty much every month now, comparing the DNC fundraising numbers to the RNC fundraising numbers, and the month of July was absolutely no different. In the month of July, the DNC raised only $3.8 million. The GOP, however, raised $10.2 million. The GOP still continues to have no debt whatsoever. The DNC, their debt actually went up, now sitting at $3.4 million. They said the Democrats haven't raised that little money in a July since 2007. 10-year low. And so, yeah, the RNC has raised about $86.5 million through the first 7 months of the year. DNC's only raised about $42 million. The GOP has $47.1 million cash on hand. The DNC, only $6.9. So, yeah, we keep saying, if the Democrat Party is expecting to have this, like, big rush of blue voters and this, like, blue wall to kind of come sweeping through, a blue wave in the 2018 midterms, where's the fundraising numbers? They got nothing.
And what are they going to say to get those numbers?
I mean, what are they going to say? You're racist. Vote for us.
Like, we already talked about, it was like, 2 or 3 weeks ago, the better deal proposal that Chuck Schumer wrote about in that New York Times. That thing fell apart within
like 5 minutes.
Yeah, because immediately Trump did that, we're banning transgenders, and they had to talk about, the fringe social justice thing, which people just don't care about, they just don't like, which is unpopular.
If you remember back to Hillary Clinton's campaign, it seemed like in the months of September and October, she pivoted away from a lot of issues and just became more like a social justice warrior candidate. And that's when she really, really started to decline. Because,
which is, I guess, good for your cat lady base, but like most Americans aren't cat ladies.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely not, and no one I know is, because I don't associate with those people. But yeah, it's absolutely true. Like, what's the DNC going to do with no money? What's the DNC going to do with all its debt?
Yeah, and you got to remember, like, your cat ladies are just spending that all on, like, wine and, like, cat toys for their cats. So, like, there's no money.
For the DNC, this is arguably one of the most important midterm elections they've had in decades. They have a chance to really, if they really do have a chance to shut down Trump, if they can get enough Democrats into office.
In the House. I mean,
Yeah,
they
especially in
are
the House.
super at risk in the Senate, which is just like, that's where they got to spend the majority of their money. And
yeah,
I
they're
mean, they have
playing
none.
defense right
They have
now.
none.
They're playing defense.
What were those numbers we had like a month ago on like the war chest for the RNC and the DNC? Like the RNC had something like $45 million in hand.
Oh yeah, I mean, I just said that.
I'm sorry.
I'll read the numbers back again. Yeah, the GOP currently has $47 million cash on hand. The DNC only has $7 million.
But then the DNC has something like $5 million in debt.
They're about $3.4 million in debt. Their debt increased in the month of July. The GOP still has no debt whatsoever.
How many Democratic senators are up for re-election in the 2018 midterms?
33 people total, minus the 8 that are Republican. There's 22, 23?
And there's like 10 of these Democrats are in states Trump won?
That is correct.
And they need to somehow protect all these seats with $7 million while somehow paying off $5 million in debt. And you have to somehow win the House back.
Yeah.
You know, you need to get those 24 House seats to get the majority back in the House.
And I mean, you know,
How do you allocate this? It's a nightmare.
Yeah.
And yeah, they're going to get more money as this gets closer, but like this is not a good trend at all.
even if you triple the amount of money that's coming in, that doesn't mean the Republican money is going to tailor off. The Republicans are still going to enter 2018 with a massive war chest of money, like you just said. And so, yeah, it's like, you know, you can't expect to play offense in the House, defense in the Senate with so many vulnerable seats with that much less money. Because not only that, you still have to go through the primary season first. And who knows, there might be some good Democrat primary challengers that try to compete.
Which we talked about in our preview on the primaries and midterms in 2018, which that was, I feel like, one of the best midweek mini podcasts we've ever done.
I personally
really
think it was.
recommend anyone listen to it if you haven't. There is a record number of people running the primaries for the DNC. It's over 200 people are running. You know, if you look at the years prior in the last primary midterms, it's only been around on average about 30 or 40 in each election. So, you know, there's individuals that the DNC want to protect against primary competition. How do you allocate that money and also have to prepare for these midterms? And, like, you have to spend... All these people that are running the primaries are spending money against each other. They're not even spending money against Republicans. It is insane. It is a nightmare situation, which, you know, they're not very good with how they run money. Like, Hillary Clinton was burning through cash like crazy, and it didn't matter. You know, look at that John Ossoff run in that special election. They spent a record amount of money on John Ossoff, and they still lost. So, yeah, you know, I am worried about the House, but also, like, knowing all this stuff, good reason not to be worried either.
The only thing that concerns me the most about the House is that, and this is, I'm actually going to admit something that a lot of Democrats do like to say, is that, yeah, a lot of those districts are gerrymandered for Republicans. And so, you know, it's a lot harder to lose when you're kind of favored to begin with. And so... that's the only thing that's kind of keeping me not as worried about the House. Not saying you don't have to, you know, you don't have to defend it. You absolutely need to do everything you can. But yeah, so it's going to be very, very difficult for the Democrats to be able to do that.
Yeah. Let's get to the next story that we have here. So there is a Missouri state senator which made some very, very radical comments this week on Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
She said that she hopes Trump gets assassinated.
Yeah, this was Missouri State Senator Maria Chappelle Nadal. See, there's another people with the hyphenated last names, I'm telling you.
These hyphenated last name people.
And she made a comment on Facebook saying, "I hope Trump is assassinated." And it got screen capped very fast.
She deleted it,
She
but
did
I mean, that
delete
doesn't
it,
matter on the internet.
But, yeah, so she was making the statement in exchange with another left-wing activist who claimed to be the cousin of a Secret Service agent, which is even worse. But, yeah, there's been a lot of calls for her to resign. I think even, like, the governor of Missouri even said, I think she should resign.
Yeah.
But
I
you
mean,
know,
it's illegal to say this.
yeah, I mean that's threatening the life of the president. Apparently they did say the Secret Service did pay her a visit, but she's not resigning. She said, "No, I'm going to keep my job." And from what I read, I'm not entirely sure how correct this story is, but the Missouri Senate themselves is actually looking for measures to expel her from the Missouri Senate. So I'm not sure if that's true, but if it is, I certainly hope they do that.
Huh. Yeah, just these people are super unhinged. What kind of person in like political office would even risk their career to say such a stupid thing? On Facebook, no less. It's crazy.
Like, look, if you're going to say something stupid and illegal like that, use a pseudonym, a fake account.
Yeah.
Not your own profile when you're a public individual who's a state senator from Missouri.
It's insane. But I guess they don't think about this stuff that maybe she has PTSD, I don't know. Let's
She's
go
definitely
into
got
this.
Trump derangement syndrome.
Yeah. Let's go into the next thing that we have here.
Yeah.
This is something that I wanted to talk about a bit just because I'm a fan of Noam Chomsky, even though he's a leftist. I mean, he's in a lot of people's minds considered one of the best political intellectuals in the country. I really like his book on anarchism, even though like I don't agree with him on like most things. But this brings it back to the talk about Antifa. Noam Chomsky, he makes some very interesting statements all the time. I liked his statement on Russia. He said like this obsession with Russia amongst leftists is very detrimental to the party, and he has made a comment this week that he says Antifa as a movement is a major gift to the right. Which, you know, it's just like a true statement. They're disintegrating the center in this country, and they're pushing people into our arms just by virtue of being the violent communists that they are. Okay, these Antifa people are insane. And, you know, someone that these people should be looking up to, you know, Noam Chomsky identifies as an anarcho-communist, which, you know, is original anarchism, which is what most of these Antifa members consider themselves, or Marxists. You think they'd like listen to the insight of the leading anarcho-communist of all time, but no, they don't. They're going to continue to go on the streets with their communist outfits and, you know, attack people and help us win elections.
And you know, you brought up a very good point about how it's driving people to the right. I mean, like I said earlier, you know, the only people who really talked about Antifa up until this point were
people in the know like us.
People in the know like us, people that have actually seen them, people that have actually, you know, been assaulted by them or whatever. Regular everyday people hadn't even heard of them, didn't really care.
Until about the inauguration.
Until around the inauguration, and especially this week. Now, like I said, I'm seeing regular everyday people all over the place talking about Antifa and how much, you know, they don't like them. In fact, this was something that happened just slightly before we started recording. Was there was a petition on whitehouse.gov to formally declare Antifa a terrorist organization. And the way the whitehouse.gov website works is if you get 100,000 signatures within the given time period, the White House has to respond. Doesn't mean they have to say yes, doesn't mean they have to say no, but they have to at least respond to the petition. And they raised the 100,000 signatures in 3 days. In fact, it just hit 100,000 slightly before we started recording this. So, yeah, the White House is going to respond. And with the violence that happened in Charlottesville, the violence that happened at the inauguration, the violence that's happened in Berkeley, violence that's happened all over the country with violent Antifa groups all over the place, especially in Boston even last couple days ago. You know, people are waking up to realize, yeah, this is a violent terrorist group and they're assaulting regular people. I mean, there's a video that went famous or went viral from Boston. There's just a lady standing there holding an American flag.
An old lady.
The guy walks up, grabs the flag out of her hand, and starts dragging her along. You know, Antifa is beating older people. You know, remember the Battle of Berkeley? They were putting M80s in wine bottles and throwing them in their crowd, and this old lady got her legs all cut up because of it. You know, these are people, they don't, you know, they're just anarchists, you know? They're just trying to cause chaos, and they're trying to destroy everything that, like, Western civilization is built on.
And they do it in the name of justice, but, like, they truly have no They have no desire to create something. All they want to do is destroy things because it's a culture of critique for them. They're critiquing society. Oh, society is patriarchal. It's misogynist. It's racist. All this different stuff. There's nothing good about how society is, so we have to tear it down. But they're not replacing it with anything of value. All they're doing is attacking everyday, ordinary citizens. And guess what? Your average everyday ordinary citizen doesn't view society in such a manner. They just want to live and let live. They don't want to, attack people with M80s in the street.
No, and they don't want to be attacked by people with M80s in the streets. Average everyday people, they don't want to have to see in the news every day that a Starbucks window has had a brick thrown through it because some anarchists felt bad about Trump being president. They don't want to have to hear about people being put in the hospital for wearing a MAGA hat walking down the street. And so, yeah, that is driving people to the right. And more people are waking up to realize, yeah, this is a terrorist organization throughout the country.
Or just more, looking at the stuff out of Boston, there was I think it was like 30 arrests of Antifa members in Boston. There's a video of this guy. He had the Israeli flag on his back and a Trump hat. Dude, throws his hat, and, they're calling, this dude a Nazi, and he's Jewish. And the police had to tweet out about, they're throwing freaking feces at us. Yeah, this is not a sympathetic cause. It's terrible what you're doing, but, yeah, it just pushes people into our arms. Mm-hmm. Especially if Donald Trump says, yeah, we're going to crack down on this. That would be one of the best things he could do.
If Donald Trump would... all he really has to do is just tell Jeff Sessions and the Department of Justice, or, however you get that onto an official list of, active terrorist organizations and investigations, get that list going, that certainly derails that effort. Because if you have the United States federal government looking into the violent atrocities that an organization's been committing across the country for years now, it's not going to last very long. And certainly I hope that's something that they do. They have to, by law now, respond to that whitehouse.gov quote. And I'm interested to see what Trump says, because I feel like, you got to think that he knows who these people are. He knows he doesn't want them.
He named them. He didn't say Antifa, but he said the alt-left, mm-hmm. which essentially is what he means. So this is something on his mind.
That's a term that no one ever used, the term alt-left, and now Trump used it to kind of just broadly.
And now they're using it all the time on Twitter.
Now they are using it. I don't think it's the best term to use for them, but I'm certainly going to use it if everyone else is going to start using it too. So
yeah, let's go on to the next article that we have. We got 2 California stories actually to get into before we get into current year college craziness. But the first one here is craziness.
You know more about this one than I do.
In and of itself already. And this is California is proposing jail time for those who use wrong gender pronouns for senior citizens. Which just that is a statement of itself. So this is just a proposed bill. But yeah, this is something that they are looking to use for transgender senior citizens in long-term care facilities. It would be illegal to misgender them.
How many transgender people are even in long-term care facilities? Maybe 2 in your entire state?
Transgender people are only 0.3% of the population?
0.3%. I can do some quick math if you want me to do some quick math.
You do math pretty quick, much quicker and better than I, so...
if you think about it, the population of California is 39 million people, right?
Okay.
So you got 39 million people. What percentage of them are going to be above the age of 65 to the point where they're considered senior citizens? Maybe 15%? Maybe, do you think? Do you think that's about right? 15%? What do you...
Yeah, that's a good number.
Okay, so let's say it's 15%. Okay, that's 5.8 million people. Let's even round that up to 6 million.
Yeah.
Okay?
6 million?
Yeah, you got 6 million people. Let's say, if even... How many of them do you think are actually in long-term care facilities? Maybe a third to a half?
Maybe,
let's
I think
conservatively
a third.
estimate that to be a half. 3 million people.
Yeah.
Okay? So if you have 3 million people... times 0.003, which is 0.3%, you get only 9,000. So, okay, fine. You got like 9,000 people, and you're going to throw people in jail or risk a $1,000 fine for misgendering them or mislabeling.
Or a jail term up to a year.
Yeah. Like, that's absolutely insane.
Now, this bill also requires them to mandate for them to have designated bathrooms and showers that are designated by gender identity as opposed to biological sex.
That's completely retarded. Most of these people live in their own, most people that live in long-term care facilities have their own bathroom, their own private bathroom. It's not like these people are living in barracks. They're living in like one-bedroom apartments and stuff. My grandmother, she lived in a long-term care facility in California. I'm very familiar with how that place operated, and most places operate very similar to it. Even all the people that were kind of, still independent livers, they had livers, people who live, not the actual organ in your body. They had their own apartments, they had their own bathrooms. Even the people that were in the kind of more assisted living type area, they have their own bathrooms. There's absolutely no necessity or reason to have individual bathrooms for people's gender identity when you have your own bathroom to begin with. It's just part of the retardation of this country, especially coming out of the communist state of California.
But California already has, you can be charged with a hate crime just for, misgender, using the incorrect pronouns towards someone. It's not even something that's just given to, it's not even just something that happens in California. Canada also has similar provisions as well. And New York City also has, massive fines for people that misgender people. So these crazy bastions of insanity are just feeding into the insanity even more so.
Yep. And that, I guess, is a good segue to the next story which we have, which is something that I've wanted to bring up and something I did kind of mention slightly earlier in the program, and that was about the whole California secession movement. So we said on the program a couple weeks ago, or it might have been last week, I don't know, these weeks all get blended together, about how the California Secretary of State is allowing the group of Cal-Exit people to collect signatures, and if they get their 600,000 or 800,000 signatures within the given time period, it has to appear on the 2018 ballot. Now, there's a secondary group that supports Cal-Exit that's trying something a little bit different. What they're trying to do is trying to push for another ballot initiative that advocates for a federal constitutional convention that could lead to independence. Now, as it currently stands, there is no clause or amendment or anything in the Constitution that allows states to leave the Union. So any state that would try to leave the Union technically would be breaking constitutional laws. And that would include, a normal California secession movement. We saw that during the Civil War, states tried to secede, war broke off from it. And so there's no real legal way that a state could leave. There's really been no precedent. No states really wanted to leave with the exception of the Civil War. There is precedent for adding new states. There is precedent for breaking current states into multiple states. So, if the whole state of Jefferson, which is kind of an advocacy group in Northern California, wanted to break off and become their own separate state, there is a constitutional bounds to do that. But what these people want to do is they want to add to a constitutional convention, which is where the states would actually pass their own constitutional amendments, which is constitutional, by the way. In fact, Texas is leading I think it's 13 or 14 other states that have been trying to get a constitutional convention going for the last couple of years here to try to get some extra amendments passed. And so if California can get on board and try to, get states to pass a constitutional amendment to allow states to leave, then any state could leave and it would be constitutional. So you wouldn't have to worry about no state can leave, it's illegal for a state to leave. As long as you get a constitutional amendment passed, that's their goal. So again, this is something, if you support this movement, you should be supporting this part as well.
Yeah. I really hope California leaves. They're like the biggest thorn in Donald Trump's side. And if they leave, we get to win every general election would be pretty freaking cool.
I think it's also interesting what happens if, let's say they get the signatures, it gets on the ballot, somehow it gets voted to leave, and then you're sitting like, okay, now what? Like, I can see that happening. I really can.
It's also like they're very dependent on like federal funds. They have like massive debt. They have to import all the water that they receive.
Almost all of it, yeah.
Almost all the water in the entire state.
Especially Southern
They have
California.
like extremely high tax rates, which is why there's so many Californians moving to Austin.
I want
And
them
like
to
they
not-
want to be a sanctuary state, so like they want to give amnesty to every single illegal alien there. And like if they became like their own country and they did such stuff, like what's stopping like all the illegal aliens in this country from just going there?
I prefer
Nothing.
that to be the case.
Yeah. I mean, that'd be super cool. Just my thing is, like, if you become a country, like, build us a wall behind yourself.
That's the next goal, and so that's Trump's second term. First
Yeah.
term is build the wall of Mexico. The second one is now
Build
California.
the wall with California.
But yeah, so
Because, like, I want to keep out the Californian refugees once it goes south. I'm sorry to the California listeners. I know we have a lot of them. I don't know how you guys do it. I live in Texas. It's pretty good in comparison. I got Governor Greg Abbott. You have Jerry Brown. It's not a comparison.
hey, I finally got to see Governor Abbott in person. I was like the only person of our friends who hadn't done that yet, so I'm happy.
Yeah, I got to see him like a year and a half.
I love him. He's so good.
He's so great. But yeah, any more things on that, or should we go into current year college craziness?
Yeah, I think we should just move on.
Yeah, let's move on.
The racist, sexist, homophobic, xenophobic.
You're fucking a white male!
The assumption that women are naturally better caregivers is part of patriarchy.
Die, cis, scum.
You will not divide us! You will not divide us! You will not divide us! You will not divide us!
It's time for some current year college craziness.
Okay, current year college craziness, the segment that keeps on giving, the segment of the show where we look at the craziness that is happening on college campuses, both here and abroad, but particularly all the stories come out of stuff happening in the United States. But the first thing that we have here, story-wise, is there is a professor that is calling for the dismantling of whiteness. You got the story for us, Bobby, there?
Again, unfortunately, yes, I do. So this was a insane Iowa professor from the University of Iowa. She's an assistant professor of education. She has vowed to dedicate her career to making sure her white students know just how evil the color of their skin makes them. According to Campus Reform, the professor, who is also white, goes by the name of Jody Lindley, and she describes herself as a queer, able-bodied, cisgender woman. But in an academic article published earlier this week, she argued that if she didn't make an effort to deconstruct whiteness in her work, that it would actually make her complicit in perpetuating the inherent evils of whiteness. As a white assistant professor of mostly white students, well, yeah, it's Iowa, of course you're mostly white, who will become higher
That state's like over 90% white.
Yeah, it's a very
I've been
white
there
state.
before.
It's a flat state with nothing but, like, agriculture. Of course it's white people living there.
Yeah.
But, yeah. As a white assistant professor of mostly white graduate students who will become higher education leaders, I work to dismantle whiteness in my curriculum, assignments, and pedagogy. So, yeah, she
Which,
also...
if you don't know what pedagogy is, that is the study of teaching.
Thank you, Enzo. I actually didn't know that. So
I've taken many classes in pedagogy, so...
I learned something today. So, she became an assistant professor in 2014, decided to develop courses that were both unveiled and rejected. The idea that neutrality and objectivity are realistic and attainable. And according to her, by treating students as equal and not actively attacking the white ones, educators are actually perpetuating hegemonic racism, sexism, classism, ableism, cisgenderism, and heterosexism.
This is all from people being white?
It's all because they're white.
So, like, the state being, like, super white is causing all that bad stuff to happen because people are white there.
Because they don't have enough trans women of color.
I've been to Iowa before. I didn't find it particularly like oppressive.
Hey, the last time I was in Iowa,
there's just not stuff there in general, but...
And so the last time that my family was in Iowa, we had to shelter in the hotel because the tornado sirens went off. That's the only thing I remember about that state.
Last time I was in Iowa, it was, I was driving through it, moving to Texas. It was nighttime. We're driving through, and all of a sudden, there was, like, blinking lights all around us. As far as the eye could see, red blinking lights.
Is it aliens?
No, it turned out I was driving through like a wind turbine farm or whatever.
Ah.
But like, yeah, there's nothing there. But I guess it's like super oppressive because white people live there. So you need to deconstruct them.
Deconstruct it, Enzo.
Deconstruct the whiteness. You got to destroy it. No more whiteness. Stupid.
Yeah.
Let's go on to the next thing that we have here out of Ithaca College. Which
I have a friend that goes to Ithaca College.
So yeah, it's in New York. There was a conservative student that was at a vigil honoring Heather Heyer, which was the woman that was killed in Charlottesville. And he was attacked by Antifa members because he wore a Young Americans for Foundation hat.
Yeah, so... Caleb Slater, the president of the Ithaca College Republicans chapter, recorded video of part of the attack during which he claims that his assailants grabbed his camera, choking him as they threw his hat to the ground. Representatives of Syracuse Black Lives Matter apologized to him after the ordeal, but also chastised him for wearing apparel from an organization that many interpret to be radical. Yeah, because wearing a MAGA hat's radical, but like chanting Black Lives Matter and...
This isn't even a MAGA hat, though. This is just like a conservative group.
Exactly. It was just the Young Americans Foundation. I'm
familiar with it. I've seen people table with it on campus. I mean, it's just like it's about as like bland and basic bitch as like conservatism comes. Like all they care about is like tax cuts and like fiscal responsibility.
And this was at the vigil for the woman who was killed in Charlottesville.
Yeah.
Like, the guy was showing his respects by going to a vigil. Instead, they're like, no, you're racist. Let me, beat you up. These people, I swear.
Yeah, and also, Slater alleges that while he was being harassed, other members of Antifa began shouting, "No Trump, no KKK, Nazis go away." Which, that's actually a strange variation, because I've usually heard as, "No Trump, no KKK, no fascist USA." So I guess it's, like, different in Ithaca, but I don't know.
But yeah, it's funny because, like, he's a first-generation Dominican-American, so he's not...
Oh, that means he's racist, obviously.
Yeah, so it's obvious that, the Dominican-American is, like, the white supremacist there. Totally.
So this guy's an immigrant.
Yeah.
They attacked a brown immigrant because he had a Young Americans Foundation hat. This stuff's ridiculous. Let's go on to the next story. I don't want to... Okay, so as with every story, this one's really ridiculous, and this is out of the University of New Hampshire. The University of New Hampshire is offering college credit for students who oppose weightism. You got the statistics for that?
Yeah. The University of New Hampshire is currently seeking unpaid interns to, quote, advance fat acceptance as a key social justice issue in society, offering 4 academic credits for 150 hours of work. Interns will be expected to plan fat-positive social events, create policy to end discrimination on the basis of weight, and work with other student diversity groups on campus to advance fat acceptance as a key social justice issue. But there's an update, though. We're reading this off of Campus Reform. They said, following the publication of this article, University of New Hampshire informed Campus Reform that it had removed the webpage, saying the group disbanded last spring and the internship is no longer offered. But we'll go into pretty much what the internship wanted. So it was the People Opposing Weightism, or POW, it was the group. Which
exclamation mark.
Yes, exclamation mark. Which formed under the University of New Hampshire Women's Studies Department in 2013. It was seeking students willing to work for 150 hours during the upcoming semester to fight against weight bias, fat phobia, and body policing, according to the program's website. So there's an archived version of the website. I'm not going to read the entire thing. Pretty much read what it was going to say. But it said that UNH notes that each academic credit for students admitted to a degree program costs $600 for residents in New Hampshire and $1,210 for out-of-state students. Therefore, for a part-time student who does not have a comprehensive tuition plan, the 4 credits earned from POW internship would cost between $2,400 and $4,800 depending on residency.
Oh, that's quite a lot of money.
Yeah, so that would
for
cost,
a single class.
It costs you a lot of money, Enzo. Do you want to have to pay $2,400 a semester just to advocate for like fat phobia?
No, I'm more into like weightlifting.
Yeah, me too.
I think it's like funny that like a women's study department has to take up the cause of fighting weightism. Like it's them just admitting like they're fat.
Yeah.
Like most of them.
Hey,
most of them are fat.
Obesity is a big problem in this country, Enzo. And I'm not being sarcastic here. Like that is something we need to tackle. But like women's studies, fat phobia, weightism courses to try to get college credit, like that's not the way you want to go about it.
It's pretty much like a cat lady factory.
Yeah.
And they don't want to be judged for being fat. That's the thing. Like, they want to, like, fight for, like, acceptance of being fat. Like, it's the acceptance of being, like, mediocre and pathetic. Like, not trying to be the best person you could possibly be. Like, they just want to be comfortable with being, like, fat lards that, like, watch Game of Thrones and drink a lot of wine. Glug, glug, glug.
I like Game of Thrones. I don't like wine, though. But no, I mean, that's kind of the whole point, though. It's the whole body positivity movement. It's just trying to, like, normalize fat people in a way that, like, society is more accepting of them, which is not good.
It's a good way to have body positivity? Lifting weights.
Yeah. I mean, look back at any videos from, like, the 1950s, 1960s. You didn't see hardly any fat people at all. And now, just walk to, like, Walmart, and you'll feel like throwing up.
Yeah, we went to Walmart actually today.
That's why I brought
a lot of
it
fat
up.
people.
Yeah.
Let's move on. So, there is a professor out of, where was this school?
The City University of New York. Or CUNY.
There's a professor that says English standard is linguistic racism.
Yeah. So, a professor of medieval literature at the City University of New York lamented academia's support for standard American English in a recent op-ed. Although standard English is typically preferred in the workplace, Dr. A.W. Strauss told Campus Reform that he considers it more important to equip students to battle against linguistic racism. So, in the op-ed, Dr. Strauss argues that colleges should support greater linguistic diversity and affirm and embrace language differences among students, such as the use of slang and African American vernacular English, which is also called AAVE. He says that affirming students' use of non-standard English is important, he says, because students who speak non-standard English may feel discouraged if called out for it, citing educators Vicky Spandel and Richard Day Stiggins. Strauss notes that negative comments tend to make students feel bewildered, hurt, or angry.
Too bad.
Yeah.
These are like feelings that people normally have. I don't know.
Or you could just like speak English correctly.
I've never. Okay, yeah, I have heard of like linguistic racism, but I haven't like been taught about it in college. But I have taught about like the inherent sexism of like words in our, English language.
A lot of the Romance languages are very,
because like a lot of words like have like default male gendered to it, and like they taught us this my freshman year in like writing courses, and like they taught like the women in the class like didn't even realize this was a thing, but like I guess there's inherent sexism in like language in English, but now there's also like inherent racism because like I guess if you're like a black person and like you don't like spelling correctly and like people like correct you on that, like you just got discriminated against.
Well, a lot of it's also...
You might feel bad. You might feel dumb because you can't spell.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it's kind of referring to things like eubonics.
Yeah.
And it's saying that, like, if you call them out on someone, like, not speaking standard English correctly because they're speaking like eubonics, which, I mean, yeah, to them, that is the way they speak. That's how they're raised. That's what they know. To them, that's correct. You know, to most people, that would not be correct.
It's like saying axe instead of ask.
Yeah. Or, you know, be like, he be going to, instead of he is going to the store. He be going to the store.
Yeah.
But, yeah, so it's more about calling that out is inherent racism. I can understand where they're coming from. It just sounds really stupid when you hear about it.
Yeah. It's like the lightest form of racism possible. Like, you just spell things incorrectly. I don't know.
Use proper grammar.
Yeah, that's pretty hard. I don't know. Here's we got a story out of Duke University in regards also to what we've been seeing with the Confederate monuments. There's been a monument or a statue of Robert E. Lee that has been vandalized there. You got some specifics for us, Bobby?
I do. So the staff at Duke University on Saturday morning removed a vandalized statue of Robert E. Lee from their campus chapel, where it stood for a long time. The Duke University president, Vincent Price, said he consulted with staff, faculty, alumni, and the Board of Trustees before authorizing the decision. He says, "I took this course of action to protect Duke Chapel, to ensure the vital safety of students and community members who worship there, and above all to express the deep and abiding values of our university," he said in an email to his students. "The removal also presents an opportunity to us to learn and heal. The statue will be preserved so that students can study Duke's complex past and take part in a more inclusive future." So, yeah, they took down the statue because they said it was violent. But really, the violence is just from people, like, breaking it. You know, if you're trying to worship at church and someone walks up with a hammer or something and starts smacking a statue outside the church, I can understand how that might feel threatening to you. But the answer is not take down the statue. The answer is get rid of the people that are trying to break your statues on campus and feel like committing acts of violence and property damage are like a good idea and justified.
No, you see, I was taught as a kid, you know, sticks and stones may break my bones, but statues of Confederate stuff will always hurt me, you know? So you just gotta take that standard and, like, attribute to every single statue, and we just gotta destroy them all like we're the Taliban. Let's go! No, this stuff just pissed me off so much.
You ever read the books like 1984 or Brave New World? Or
hell yeah.
You read those and it says, you know, like, all traces of the former life were destroyed. The books were burned. The statues were taken down. That's part of what they're trying to do. They're trying to reshape history to the point where people don't know about these things. To the point where, you know, like they said, they're correcting history, not, you know, destroying it. They're erasing.
How do you correct history? History just happens and you report on it.
I mean, that's literally what
History's
they said.
not supposed to have a narrative assigned to it.
They want history to have a narrative. They want it to be what they believe. They want their narrative pushed on it. And so that's, you know, history should be taught as what happened and why it happened, not, you know, selectively leaving things out or changing things just because you don't like it.
What the hell? Let's go into the last story for current college craziness. I left the most triggering for last. This is out of Texas A&M. We reported on this a couple months ago. There is a professor, a black professor, that was advocating for white genocide, and it seems like the college is now siding with him. You got specifics for us on that, Bobby?
I do. So if you remember back in May, an email to students was obtained where Texas A&M President Michael K. Young refused to discipline or fire Professor Tommy Curry. Curry called for white genocide, saying in 2012 podcast, "In order to be equal, in order to be liberated, some white people may have to die." They said that while condemning Curry's remarks as disturbing comments about race and violence that stands in a stark contrast to Aggie's core values, Young refused to say that they were disqualifying for Curry's position or worthy of discipline. Young defended the comments as protected by the First Amendment, saying the First Amendment of the Constitution protects the rights of others to offer their personal views, no matter how reprehensible those views may be. And yet that's the same side that tries to shut down free speech rallies. That's the same time that's the same side that tries to tear down Confederate statues because they think it's racist or triggering to them. That's the same side that tries to throw bottles filled with piss and shit at people because they disagree with them politically. Like, that is hypocritical.
If he can't be, like, fired for calling for racial genocide, like, what can he be fired for calling for?
At this point, nothing.
I just don't have anything to say. I'm just flabbergasted that they even allow this. And this is happening, like, 3 hours from us?
Not even.
At one of the most prestigious colleges in the state? One of the biggest colleges in the country? Colleges are so stupid. Don't go to college. It was a mistake that I went to college. Don't go. Don't let your kids go to college. That's just my endorsement of colleges. Don't do it.
But Enzo,
it's so stupid.
But Enzo, the president of A&M says that they stand for equality. They stand against the advocacy of violence, hatred, and killing.
The equality of genocide of white people.
He says, we stand against the advocacy of violence, hate, and killing. We firmly commit to the success, not the destruction of each other. Then why the hell are you keeping on your employment records the guy who advocated for exactly the opposite of that?
I don't know.
God, I swear.
Well, that's the last story for Current Year College Craziness. We're going to take a break and then try to come back more high energy for international news, and then we'll get out of here.
All right.
Hey, Patriots and Warriors, this is Bass Stickman, and you are listening to Trump Republic Radio.
We were minding our own business, trying to celebrate the free speech that you think is so important, and you came to our rally and you chanted, "You're fags. Go home. You have low testosterone."
And he's been on many very prominent right-wing shows talking about his cause, and that would be Simon Roach of the Sadelanders.
Hello Enzo, hello Robert. Thank you very much for having me. Let me say this. It has been my privilege. You won't see it from my perspective, so I'm not going to, it's pointless me trying to persuade you. But you will, let me just tell you, I'm very grateful for this opportunity. I appreciate it very much. And if you'd like me to come on again at any time, hopefully there will be fewer difficulties and challenges, and I won't mess you around as I have done this time, for which I'm very sorry. But I would love to come on again. Anytime you ask, I'll be there.
Please call China and tell them we're all counting on China. Tell the president we became friends for 2 days, that he was great.
You really have to walk me through this here, because I am not familiar with so much of the terminology. Like, for instance, can you shed some light on what is a cuck?
A cuck.
How much money will you make today banging that drum for Soros? Soros must pay you good money to bang that drum. Whoa. Hey, do you play ping pong?
Hey, welcome back from the break. I hope you, took a couple of minutes because you didn't have a choice about it. But let's get into some international news. The first thing out of Europe, the big story was the attack in Barcelona, where 13 people died. You got some specifics on that, Bobby?
13 people dead, more than 100 injured, when a terrorist rammed a Fiat van into crowds of tourists. After the attack, video showed bodies and bodies and bodies all over the place. So sad. But the attacker fled on foot after he hired the van, came to a halt, and then was unaccountable for earlier today, said the police. The man who hired the van was said to be 18-year-old Musa Al-Kabir, who used his brother's ID for the rental. The two suspects, including Al-Kabir's brother Driss, handed himself into police. They were arrested for the attack, and a man was also shot dead as he rammed police with a roadblock nearby, but that appears to be unconnected because, of course, says officials. So, pretty much what we know is that so far ISIS has claimed responsibility for the massacre. 13 innocent people have died because a guy decided to drive a truck into a crowd of people.
Or a van.
A van into a crowd of people. A van that he, it says hired, but that's pretty much saying they rented a van to do it. Now, the investigators believe that this is linked to an explosion at a home that was 70 miles away, which happened 24 hours earlier. So if that's true, that probably meant the police were aware of these guys and were following them. I'll cut that out.
Jesus.
So, anyways, 2 hours after the mass killing, a man was then shot dead driving through a roadblock in the outskirts of Barcelona, injuring 2 police officers, including one who suffered a broken leg. He is now not believed to be part of that terrorist attack. But they got a lot of it on video. I mean, this is like a big old white van. But, yeah. Terrorism has struck Europe yet again.
Once again. Very similar to the Nice attack in Paris. You know, a lot of casualties with the van. But that was a truck that they used in Nice. But, I mean, we've been seeing this over and over and over again. You know, you can look at also what that happened in London at the London Bridge. They did something similar. It's pretty grotesque they used this strategy. They also did a similar thing in Stockholm, Sweden.
Yeah, for the Christmas market.
They also did another thing back in December in Berlin similar to this.
That was the Christmas market, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's so many at this point. We've talked about these terrorist attacks as they happen. I mean, what more does it say? It sucks. It's really bad. We wish something happened. But nothing happens. But one thing I did want to bring up about this is Barcelona is a super lefty city. It's one of the most lefty cities in Europe. I mentioned the Spanish Civil War earlier. You know, the Republic in Spain was just super lefty. The capital of that was Barcelona. So this goes back like a long ways. But like after this attack happened the next day, there were like protests by lefties to like against Islamophobia and saying we need to be like more tolerant in letting these people in. And there was like a far right like protests against like letting in more, you know, of these Islamic immigrants. And they were attacked by the leftists and their Antifa. You know, what do they say about insanity? Insanity is like they're doing the same thing over and over and over again, expecting like a different outcome. Like, you keep on saying like we need to stop the Islamophobia, need to be more tolerant, but these things keep happening. And they just keep happening. That's not the solution, okay? You need to get serious about this stuff. More people are gonna die. And I don't know, they just seem resolved to let more people die because they don't want to address this thing, because they don't want to seem racist or something. I don't know.
And it's also worth pointing out that the man who rented that bus was Moroccan.
Yeah.
He wasn't even Spanish, even though he was Muslim. So.
Yeah.
But that leads us to another story that we have. This time instead coming out of Finland, where there was another terrorist attack there. And this one, the guy who did it was heard shouting Allahu Akbar as he was doing it. And what happened was he started stabbing people. He stabbed upwards of 6 to 8 people, I believe is what the number currently is. 2 of them, unfortunately, have both died in the streets of Turku in Finland. They said, 2 were dead, 6 others injured, including several men who came to the aid of the victims, including several women. In fact, the superintendent of Finland's National Bureau of Investigation says, "We think the attacker especially targeted women, and the only men that were wounded were the ones who were coming to defense of them." They said 1 man was injured trying to help a victim, and 1 man tried to stop the attacker. 8 people were injured, ranging It aged from 15 to 67, with 3 victims still in intensive care. They're treating it as a murder, but during the night they received an additional investigation which indicates that the criminal offenses are now considered to be terrorist killings. So 2 terrorist attacks in Europe within the last couple of days. Now, the one thing is about the Finland attack is there was actually a British man who was there who did jump to the rescue. He was one of the ones who was injured, and he's now being he's pretty much now being hailed as a hero, which I mean he is, because he stepped in to try to stop the terrorists from stabbing people, and he got stabbed in the process. So yeah, he's a hero in my opinion. What do you think, Enzo?
Yeah, he's trying to save people's lives from these terrorists.
But as far as we know right now, we haven't actually gotten the identity of the guy who actually did it. But it'll be interesting to see how long it takes before they admit it. Because if the story is true, that the guy shouted Allahu Akbar, then that pretty much answers that question for us, doesn't it?
Yeah, and culture has a thing about how they do this, where like the longer it takes them to reveal like the identity of who does it, the more likely it's going to be a Muslim. And, he said Allahu Akbar. We pretty much know on the stuff.
Not only that, they said one of the women who was injured, who was stabbed, was in a wheelchair.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Ugh. Let's move on to the last thing that we have for Europe, which is actually good news, because usually Europe is like bad news. So Italy, in their cooperation with Libya, has really paid off, and they've seen a 67% drop in migrants crossing the Mediterranean into Italy compared to the same time period a year prior.
Yep, that's absolutely correct, and it's all pretty much because of the fact that they started putting out that giant anti-refugee boat, which was turning back a lot of like the NGO boats.
The German NGOs that cooperate with these Libyan traffickers.
Yeah, so ever since that boat started, in the first 10 days of August, it's down 76%. So, that pretty much shows you that all it takes is just a little bit of effort to try to stop these people, and you can do it. But there's been no effort at all, and they've tried to make efforts like that illegal. And instead they get, unchecked mass migration into their continent and their countries. So, yeah. I'm glad that people are finally stepping up to it, and it looks like so far, at least, it's been pretty successful.
Which is good, because they can't afford these people coming there anymore. Italy is not even well off economically, but they're being, endlessly flooded with these economic migrants from Africa that, just want social welfare. Most of them don't work at all, so it's good they don't have to deal with that stuff so much anymore. Anything else you want to say in there? Let's move on.
Let's go ahead and let's move on.
Okay, let's move on to some stuff about Asia. So the first thing that we have to say is in regards to the North Korean situation, which is actually the thing that we opened up the show with last week. The key thing that we want to talk about is it looks like North Korea is backing off threatening Guam.
Yeah, that's right. This kind of came after it seemed like everything escalated to within inches of thermonuclear war last week. But North Korea has now sort of backed off of that launch that they said they wanted to send at Guam. And up until, for most of the week, that's pretty much how the story stayed, that the whole North Korean situation had kind of at least calmed down a little bit. That was until yesterday, where North Korea warned that they were going to have a merciless strike ahead of joint U.S. and South Korean military drills that have been planned for a long time. They said that the upcoming U.S.-South Korean military exercises are reckless behavior, driving the situation into the uncontrollable phase of nuclear war. But Pyongyang also declared that its army can target the United States anytime, and neither Guam, Hawaii, nor the U.S. mainland can dodge their merciless strike. So it seems that even though they've kind of backed off of their Guam threat, they're still threatening to bomb the U.S. or
our territories,
our territories or our friends over the U.S.-South Korean military drills that are currently going on. Kim Jong-un actually even said himself, They said Kim would watch a little more of the foolish and stupid conduct of the Yankees, a North Korean statement said last week. But the U.S. military and Trump administration officials said that the 10-day military exercises set to begin Monday would go ahead as scheduled. I don't really think North Korea is going to do anything. I think it'd be really stupid to try to do it while there's joint drills going along, which means, like, that's where the focus of all your military is like joint with the South Korean military. That would be the stupidest time to attack, because, like, all your forces and everything you have is there. But yeah, so even though it seemed like the North Korean situation kind of calmed down a little bit early in the week, it looks like it might be ramping back up this week.
We'll have to keep a close eye on that then.
Yeah.
Let's move into the next thing that we have here.
You know this one.
Yeah. It looks like on the Chinese and Indian border there has been some border conflict between troops on both sides. They have actually been throwing rocks at each other and, like, shooting rocks with slingshots. Now, this is happening in a disputed area in the Himalayas, and in Srinagar, India. This official said on Wednesday that the exasperated tensions during a month-long standoff between the two armies has now resulted in them taking shots at each other with rocks when Chinese troops try to enter the Indian territory. They tried to do so twice, but they were pushed back both times. But, yeah, pretty serious stuff in the sense of these are, like, two of the biggest superpowers in the world, and, yeah, they have some hostilities at the moment. Not stuff that we generally want to be seeing in the world, although it doesn't directly harm us in any sort of way in the United States. But, just kind of a potential conflict. I don't think it's going to escalate, but it's a potential conflict that would have major implications on the geopolitical situation of the world.
Yeah, I mean, China and India, that's two largest countries in the world. Alone, they make up, like, almost half the population of the planet.
Yeah. But, other than that, I didn't have much other to say. Just there has been some border conflicts there. Let's get into the next thing. This is actually some reporting out of Australia I have here. The Chinese, it looks like, have been involved in some land grabs in Antarctica. Do you want to give us some specifics for it, Bobby?
Yeah, so they said China has conducted undeclared military activities in Antarctica, is building up a case for a territorial claim, and is engaging in minerals exploration there, the report said. They said that the calculation that the Australian government has long made in shortchanging Antarctic affairs in order to boost activities up north is looking increasingly risky. But it says that China has ceased being a minor player in the polar region and is becoming a major actor as a result of the huge budget increase in the past decade. So a lot of it is aimed at resources, including minerals, hydrocarbons, fishing, tourism, transport routes, water, and bioprospecting. So it's pretty much China saying, hey, we got all this land and, like, resources and minerals down there, but, like, we're the only ones who haven't really got a piece of the pie yet. So this is them pretty much saying, hey, we have a case here too. We're the second largest economy on the planet. We're the largest country by population on the planet. Like, we should be able to come down here and have some of this land for ourselves.
Even though international treaty says no one is able to claim Antarctica for their own.
Yeah, I mean, but that being said, lots of countries, they all have, like, small outposts down there.
They can have, like, research outposts, but they can't be putting military troops there.
Correct.
But, I mean, the Chinese are looking to exploit it for resources, the same things that they're doing in East Africa.
You call it a resource project. You send, like, scientists and drills down there, and you happen to send 100 or 200 troops to protect them. And all of a sudden, hey, look, you have a permanent base. And that's pretty much how this stuff goes, especially, like you said, in Africa. I mean, people don't realize that, like, China is...
They exploit a lot of people in Africa.
What China is doing to Africa right now is, like, almost as bad as what people think colonization was. Like, they're going in there and they're taking resources left and right, setting up posts and everything.
Yeah.
Like,
But they're Asian, so people aren't as critical as if it was,
if people understood
Europeans.
just what's going on in Africa right now when it comes to China. Like, it's pretty insane.
Yeah. Let's get into the last story we have here on Asia. This was actually something that happened today, right before we started recording the show. And this is the USS John S. McCain has crashed into a merchant ship near the Strait of Malacca.
Yeah, all we have right now is we know that 10 sailors are missing and 5 are injured after the USS John S. McCain collided with a merchant ship near the Strait of Malacca. That's near Singapore because that's where it was headed to. With Singapore, they said the ship is currently sailing under its own power and is headed to port. Initial reports indicated that the ship sustained damage to the port side aft, and the extent of the damage and personal injuries is currently being determined. Search and rescue operations are underway in coordination with local authorities right now. So hopefully those 10 sailors that are missing will be found. I know when the last Navy ship that collided with that Japanese vessel, like the guys that were missing, they ended up finding them drowned in the ship. So
I forget how many died, but it was a big one.
6 or something like that.
Yeah.
So, I certainly hope that the 10 sailors are all right. And the 5 that are injured, I hope that they make a recovery with however bad their injuries were. And the ship, too. I hope that it didn't sustain too much damage. I hope they're able to fix that and get it on its way. But, so that's one of the things that that story will probably take a few days before more information of it gets out. But, it's just sad and interesting. This is the second time something like this has happened within the last couple of months.
Yeah. Let's move on to the one thing that we have for Africa, and this is out of Zimbabwe. The president of Zimbabwe, the 93-year-old Robert Mugabe, the dictator who has been in power since Zimbabwe has become a country since the collapse of Rhodesia, has recently stated in a rally in Harare on Monday that the government will not prosecute individuals who killed white farmers during the 2000s, the government-sanctioned purges in the 2000s of white farms, in which hundreds of white-owned farms were seized and invaded, and thousands of white farmers were slaughtered. I just wanted to mention this because it's an aspect of like racial conflict that people don't really understand in situations where there are white minorities in African countries. We've had on Simon Roach the Saillanders before. If you haven't listened to that episode, it's probably one of the best, if not the best episode of Trump Public Radio we've ever had. But in Zimbabwe, they just don't care. They're gonna oppress the whites to no end because they just don't care. They see them as colonizers, even though, whites have lived in Rhodesia for over 100 years. But, I just wanted to bring some quick mention to that since it's stuff that I keep track of. But, let's move on to some stuff in the Middle East, and then we're going to be out of here.
Yeah.
So, Iran has threatened to restart its nuclear program. You got some specifics for us on that, Bobby?
I do. Just one moment. So, Iran is currently threatening, or at least their president is currently threatening to restart their nuclear program. It said that it could be restarted in a matter of hours, quote unquote, if the American government imposes further sanctions on Tehran, said President Hassan Rouhani on Tuesday. He said that a reconstructed nuclear program would be far more advanced. A veiled threat to that country could start enriching uranium up to the level of 20%, which is a step towards building a nuclear weapon. Such enriching activities were a major concern before 2015 when Tehran signed a landmark agreement with the United States and other world powers that lifted crippling economic sanctions in return for severe limits on Iran's nuclear activities. Trump has repeatedly called the nuclear deal a disaster, said that he believes the Iranians are violating its terms, and has twice called for reviews in hopes of finding reasons to kill it. So, Iran is pretty much saying that, yeah, if you pass more sanctions, we're going to restart a nuclear program. We're going to break this nuclear deal that you have with us. Because, I mean, technically that would be the case. I mean, the whole point of the nuclear deal was saying, we're not going to mess with you, you know, and if you don't do anything nuclear-wise. So they're pretty much saying, yeah, if the U.S. passes more sanctions, they're going to restart the nuclear program. If you break the deal, we'll break the deal. I don't like the deal. I think it's a bad deal. Trump thinks it's a bad deal. I agree with him on that. But I can see where they're coming from, and hopefully they don't, because the last thing we need is Iran to start making nukes themselves.
Yeah, not a good situation happening out there. Let's move on to some of the stuff with Trump's decision on Afghanistan. Now, we mentioned this prior in the show, but Trump is looking to release that statement tomorrow, Monday, you said?
Yeah, he's releasing a statement on Monday night, is what they were saying. It's going to be his very first live televised statement from the White House.
Now, this will either go one of... There's two ways this is going to go. We're either pulling the troops out or we're sending more troops to Afghanistan.
And this is one of those things. I honestly don't know what the decision's going to be. Because we mentioned earlier, you know, with Bannon gone, Bannon was the guy who wanted to say no more troops there. And a lot of the people around him were the ones that are saying add more troops. Trump has been saying that the situation in Afghanistan is getting worse. Which, you know, that indicator would all kind of point to saying, you know, add more troops. But if you were going to be sending more troops, why would you make it a televised statement from the White House? You know, why, if you're just going to be sending 2,000 or 3,000 more troops, why not just, you know, have the Secretary of Defense make that statement and just say, yeah, we're going to be sending more troops?
To where if it's a televised event and he says we're pulling them out, that's going to help his approval rating.
Right. And, you know, a big decision like that to pull them out would be something you'd want to televise. That would be something you wouldn't want to just have lying around and saying, oh, yeah, by the way, we're pulling the troops out. No, that's something that is a big deal. All presidents, whenever they've added troops or pulled them out, have had big, you know, statements from the White House like this. So that part of me tends to think, while some things look like it's a we're adding troops situation, other parts of me looks like it's we're pulling out situation. I mean, there was an article that we talked about, I think it was either last week or the week before, where we were talking about the White House was looking for ideas on how to privatize the war and get the troops home and instead just send over, like, you know, Blackwater type guys to finish off the job. And I remember reading an article also from that same week where Trump was asking the Joint Chiefs of Staff, he said, hey, what would be your opinion on if we were to pull out completely from Afghanistan? So it's one of those things. I have no idea what the decision's going to be. I certainly hope he's saying we're pulling out, or at least making significant steps to pull out, or at least, you know, starting the process of pulling out. We've been there, God, for like 16 or 17 years now. It's about time.
It's about, like, what, 2001?
Yeah, there's no reason for us to still be there. So hopefully we're pulling out. I wouldn't be surprised if they said we're adding more troops.
Because McMaster has called for more.
Yeah, McMaster has called for more. I wouldn't be surprised if they said we're adding more troops. I wouldn't like that decision. I think that would be a bad decision. But it's not like I'm going to be like, oh my God, they're playing us for fools. Like, where did this decision come from? No, I can understand where both decisions would come from. So that'll be just something we'll have to wait for tomorrow night to figure out.
Yeah. Let's go into the very last story we have this week. We wanted to close it out, as always, on some good news. This is something that happened today, or just prior to doing the show, and that is the Russian Air Force in Syria has destroyed a large column of Islamic State militants, their vehicles, and large-caliber weapons heading towards the Syrian city of Deir ez-Zor, the Russian Defense Ministry has said. They have said they've killed over 200 militants. The column had around 20 SUVs armed with large-caliber weapons and mortars. The Russian jets have also taken out a number of armored vehicles, including tanks. So, and generally, we just want the conflict in Syria to end, me and you both. We aren't against Russians being involved to do so. And when we let the Russian military do what they need to do in Syria in tandem with the Syrian army, they're destroying ISIS. And, Donald Trump ran on destroying ISIS, but I'm fine if Russia's doing it as well. So, anything else you want to say on that, Bob? Or are we good?
I'm glad that ISIS is getting destroyed. That's all I have to say about that.
And it's collapsing at the moment. They've lost a lot of territory since Donald Trump has come into office. What was it, like 70% or something?
I'm not sure what the exact number was, but it's something
significantly.
Like that.
I mean, Raqqa's already fallen.
And they said they're also moving.
And Mosul's fallen. Okay, Raqqa hasn't fallen, but Mosul's fallen.
Raqqa is like the last step.
It's already being taken at the moment.
Mosul, it took months to liberate that city, and Raqqa is their capital. It's going to take even longer.
Yeah. So. But, yeah, we just wanted to bring a little update on that because it's good stuff to hear about.
Absolutely.
But with that said, I don't have anything else have to say. We've been doing the show very into the wee hours of the morning.
We got started a bit late.
Yeah. With that said, just want to say thank you for once again listening to Trump Republic Radio, and have a good one.
Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.